I spent $200,000. Kenny, who didn't even come to my mom's funeral, had suddenly flown overseas. $200,000. What did you do with all that money? Remember our nice piano at home? I sold the dude. Being from a rich family has its perks. It was a good piano. I never thought it would sell for $200,000. Kenny thought the piano at home was his, but he was wrong. My condolences. I get all the inheritance from the family estate. But that piano was actually bought by our grandpa for my brother, so it's still his. My brother loves that piano and teaches piano now. He left it at our house because it's too big for his place. If my brother finds out we sold it without asking him, he'll be really mad. Just giving him money won't fix it. When I told Kenny this, he hung up right away. Hi, I'm Rachel Schneider, a 45-year-old office worker. My family has a long history tracing back to colonial times and is quite prominent in our community. Thanks to my late father's successful business, we now possess assets worth $9 million. Originally, my older brother was set to inherit the family estate, but he chose love over inheritance, opting to forego his rights to marry his girlfriend, who needed an heir for her family's wealth. This decision left me with the task of finding a spouse to carry on our family name. Despite my desire for independence and reluctance to rely on family wealth, I focused solely on my career, and before I knew it, I was in my mid-40s and still single. Realizing the urgency of continuing our family line, I decided to take action and attended a singles mixer. It was there that I met Kenny, my current husband. Surprisingly, he's 10 years younger than me, but at the event, he showed no interest in the younger women and approached me directly. I'm not sure if you're okay with someone my age, I asked him multiple times. But Kenny gazed into my eyes and replied, I'm a bit shy and not very assertive. I've always been attracted to older, more grounded women. Kenny's demeanor matched his words, gentle and reserved. I sensed he could bring a sense of calm to my family, which tends to be assertive. As our relationship blossomed, there was something important I needed to share with him. My mother had been ill and bedridden for the past year, and my sister-in-law, Catherine, and I were taking turns caring for her. Considering our age and the prospect of marriage, I struggled with how to reveal this to Kenny. Eventually, on our third date, I mustered the courage to tell him. To my relief, he not only accepted but also proposed, expressing his willingness to assist with caregiving. His kindness deeply moved me. At least, that's how I initially felt. Kenny works as a daycare teacher, but just 4 months into our marriage, he expressed a sudden desire to quit his job. When I inquired about the reason, he wore a remorseful expression and said, Sorry, Rachel. The parents at the daycare are too demanding and complain a lot. I can't handle it anymore. It was evident that Kenny was struggling, appearing so timid. Normally, I would have encouraged him to persevere, but with him assisting in my mother's care and my pregnancy progressing, I remained silent. However, I soon began to regret my leniency. One day, as I exited the shower and approached the bedroom, I overheard Kenny whispering on the phone. What I heard left me shocked and unsettled. I managed to tie the knot without her suspecting a thing. I'm jobless. She bought my story about quitting work hook, line, and sinker. Little does she know, I ditched that job 2 years back. His conversation seemed directed at a friend on the other end of the line. A faint male voice responded, You're quite the operator. Rachel's family is loaded, so I thought I hit the jackpot when I met her at that singles event. But let's face it, given her age, I was probably her only option. I felt duped. Was the sweet Kenny I fell for all an act? I wanted to confront him right then and there, but the thought of the baby stopped me cold. With Kenny's true colors revealed, I began to doubt our future. Today, Catherine will be looking after my mom until 5:00 p.m. Then it's my turn. I debated whether to confide in someone about Kenny. That's when my brother's wife, Catherine, approached me. Rachel, you seem troubled. If there's anything on your mind, feel free to share, Catherine said, her kindness evident, having cared for her own mother for years and now mine. She's really good with Mom too. So I confided in her about Kenny, and she listened attentively. It's good you opened up. Keeping it to yourself could harm your unborn child, she reassured me. Yeah, I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Talking won't solve everything, but it does lighten the load. Still, this situation is quite something. Catherine looked genuinely concerned, almost as if it were her own problem. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and Kenny walked in without waiting for an answer. Both of us were surprised, but Kenny acted as if nothing was wrong and smiled. Rachel, I'll be helping with your mom's care from now on. You're not in the safe period yet, so I don't want you to strain yourself, Kenny said, playing the gentleman in front of me. Really? Okay, let me show you how to care for her. No, I'll learn from Catherine. You just rest at home. Well, my brother's coming home early today, so we won't need her help. Upon hearing that, Catherine looked at me, shaking her head, as if to say, it's okay. She might confront Kenny and get the full story once I'm gone. With that in mind, I decided to leave it to her and head home. But I couldn't shake my worry, so I pretended to leave but hid nearby. Catherine tried to start a conversation with Kenny, but he beat her to it. I've been meaning to ask, why are you taking care of your mother-in-law in this house? He asked, using the same tone as on the phone. Well, my husband's busy, and Rachel has her job. But more importantly, why you ask? Then Kenny interrupted. What? And began hurling insults at Catherine. You live in such a wealthy home. You'd have enough money to put your mother-in-law in a care facility, wouldn't you? Or is it something else? Did your husband give up his claim to this family's wealth? So you're trying to curry favor by taking care of her? That must be it. You'd be pretty upset if you married into money and didn't get a piece of the inheritance, wouldn't you? It was cruel. I was furious too, ready to leave the room. But just as I was about to, Catherine, noticing me, signaled with her eyes to stay put. Reluctantly, I remained silent and watched the scene unfold. You've hit a nerve, haven't you? If that's the case, leave right now. This family's wealth belongs to my wife and me, so I'll handle my mother-in-law's care alone from now on. With Kenny's stern declaration, Catherine felt it was pointless to argue further and left the scene. Sensing the tension, I discreetly stepped outside, concerned about Catherine's feelings and wondering how to apologize to her. Kenny took over Mom's care entirely, refusing any assistance from me. He only provided basic instructions on caregiving. But his neglectful approach led to tragic consequences, and our mother passed away. The funeral took place at the church where generations of our family had been laid to rest. However, Kenny was nowhere to be found from the moment Mom passed away. Despite my attempts to locate him, I was too overwhelmed with funeral arrangements to pursue the matter. Relatives and neighbors were puzzled by his absence. Catherine, grief-stricken at the altar, apologized for trusting Kenny with Mom's care. Approaching her, I tried to offer some comfort. Catherine, please don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. Rachel, it's not your fault either. But where is that man? I wanted to confront him today, and he disappears just as Mom passes away. Exactly. And didn't Kenny often leave the house while he was supposed to be caring for Mom? Where was he going? Yes, neighbors mentioned he was frequently out, almost as if he wasn't caregiving at all, just loafing around. They also mentioned a big truck that came by once. What was that about? I wanted to ask, but with the funeral, I didn't bring it up. Days passed, and Kenny still hadn't returned. Then, I received a call from him. Hey, Rachel, I'm in a fancy hotel in Europe, like the ones you see on TV travel shows, Kenny said nonchalantly. Kenny, you missed Mom's funeral, and now this. I spent $200,000. $200,000? Where did you get that kind of money? Remember the grand piano at our family home? I sold it. Who knew it was worth $200,000? Kenny confessed to selling the family's cherished grand piano and squandering the money on luxury travel in Europe. I never imagined Kenny would pull something like this while supposed to be caring for Mom. Our family home had tight security, but with family, it's different. That truck must have been there to move the piano. Why would you do something so selfish? The whole family was worried about you missing the funeral. Well, once you have a kid, you won't have much free time. Since you have a job, I guess I'll have to be the stay-at-home dad. Kenny's words left me stunned. Despite my anger, his willingness to take on childcare was a silver lining. But it seemed he was aiming to live off me. Additionally, Kenny seemed to think the piano belonged to me. Confronting Kenny, who had unknowingly sold a piano and spent the money, I started with, "My condolences." "Huh? What do you mean?" Kenny seemed bewildered, so I explained about the piano. "That piano belonged to my grandfather, bought for my brother. So it still belongs to him." "Oh, really? I'll just apologize to your brother then," Kenny replied, lacking any remorse for selling someone else's property. Kenny only met my brother at our wedding, so it's understandable he didn't know. My brother is a piano teacher and has loved the piano since childhood. He begged our grandfather for that specific piano. Although there's no room for it in his house now, it's still his. He even dreams of starting his own school with it. The piano means everything to him. I can only imagine what punishment he'll have for you when he hears it was sold without permission. By the way, my brother despises dishonesty. As I explained, Kenny remained silent. Understand? Mere compensation won't suffice when he finds out you sold his beloved piano. He's not one to compromise. I wonder what punishment awaits you. With that warning, the call abruptly ended. He's probably regretting it now. I called my brother and told him everything. Needless to say, he was furious. The next day, Kenny rushed home, finding everyone gathered in the living room. "What's going on? Why is everyone here?" Kenny asked nervously. "I heard everything from Rachel," my brother said sternly. "What possessed you to sell someone else's property, especially something so valuable, without consulting the family?" Kenny tried to justify himself, visibly shaken. I was just trying to pitch in with the household chores out of boredom. When I saw the old, large grand piano, I figured no one was using it anymore. So you decided to sell it. Yeah, it seemed like a waste to just leave it there. My brother, wearing a stern expression, pressed further. Really? That piano was special, imported by our grandfather from a top European manufacturer. Where's the money from the sale? As anticipated, my brother was playing his part well. Everyone probably knew Kenny had spent all the money on an overseas trip, but my brother was aiming for a confession in front of everyone. Kenny seemed lost in thought, struggling to come up with an excuse. The sales money. Yeah, it hasn't come in yet. Kenny stammered, clearly flustered, but my brother wasn't buying it. You're lying? How deceitful can you get? And what about those souvenirs from Europe in that huge suitcase? Kenny recoiled as if struck by lightning, closing his eyes in shame. I'm sorry, I spent all the money. Kenny's admission left the relatives murmuring in shock. Everyone knew the value of that grand piano. They couldn't fathom how Kenny could blow $200,000 on just one trip overseas. My brother, looking down at Kenny, lifted his chin with his hand, locking eyes with him as he said, "As Rachel probably told you, that piano was mine. Now that it's gone, you'll repay every penny. If you can't, I'll sue you for theft. Are we clear?" My brother's intensity was palpable, almost resembling a mob boss. While this would typically be a family matter, my brother was likely using intimidation tactics, knowing Kenny was clueless about the law. Predictably, Kenny lost his voice and began sweating profusely. Then, with a terrified glance at me, he pleaded, "Rachel, please help me." His voice was desperate, but I had no intention of intervening. This mess was entirely of his own making. When I rejected his plea, Kenny resorted to a ludicrous argument, saying, "Don't be so cold. I looked after your mom while you were pregnant. I saw the trip as a reward for myself after caregiving. Let's just say we both agreed to sell the piano this way. Since we're siblings, it can't be considered theft, right?" I was so dumbfounded that my mouth hung open, unable to form a response. It was Catherine who stepped in to defend me. "That's enough. Didn't you tell Rachel not to assist with caregiving? You even accused me of being after the inheritance and tried to push me away. Kenny, did you say such awful things to my wife too? Yes, I didn't want to worry you, so I kept quiet. But this man must have been scheming to sell the piano without letting Rachel and me near the family home. Catherine's words resonated with me, remembering how Kenny prevented me from getting close to the family home when he said he'd handle our parents alone. I reached the same conclusion. My brother's anger flared up once more. Listen closely. My wife cared for Mom because she wanted her to stay out of a facility. She agreed out of kindness, not for money. First, apologize to my wife right now. With my brother grabbing Kenny by the collar, tears welled up in Kenny's eyes as he knelt before Catherine. I'm so sorry, Catherine. Kenny's apology for his disrespectful behavior towards Catherine didn't soften the cold gazes of the relatives. Then, one of them shouted at Kenny. You need to repay the money from the piano sale promptly. We can't tolerate a criminal in the Schneider family. It'll stain our name. Misinterpreting the situation once more, Kenny made another peculiar remark. Exactly. We can't have a criminal in the family, right, bro? So let's keep calm. We'll work together as a couple to repay the debt gradually. Even my uncle was left speechless by Kenny's illogical response. Feeling that further discussion would be futile, I excused myself to retrieve something from my room. Ever since the phone incident, I had a divorce lawyer's business card ready. Kenny, call this number. I want our marriage to end. Let's handle things through legal channels. Kenny's face drained of color when he saw the business card I handed him. Why? We're expecting a baby. Why are you doing this? At that moment, I disclosed what Kenny had said to everyone on the phone. You heard that. It was just a joke. Do you think that's a valid excuse? I've known all along that you were after my inheritance. Everyone present glared at Kenny, realizing there was no way to justify his actions. Kenny responded with defiance, unwilling to admit his wrongdoing. Rachel, please, I need your help, Kenny pleaded in desperation. He explained that the buyer of the grand piano he sold wanted to return it and get a refund. When Kenny had sold the piano, he claimed it was in perfect condition. However, upon inspection, the buyer discovered a large engraving on the back indicating my brother's ownership. It seemed Kenny hadn't checked thoroughly. Instead of selling it through a reputable dealer, he likely chose a shady one enticed by offers like completely free, and now he faced the consequences. Kenny had to refund $200,000 to the buyer, a significant sum considering his debt to my brother. Despite Kenny's attempt to file for bankruptcy, my brother and I took legal action to prevent it. Now, burdened with more debt, Kenny worked tirelessly in manual labor. Eventually, the heirloom grand piano was safely returned. Relieved, my brother secured it with a strong lock and installed a security camera in the room, exercising caution. No one will touch that piano until I begin my piano lessons, my brother declared, unchanged from his childhood self, which brought a smile to my face. With his desire to start a piano school at our family home, I decided to discuss sharing our mother's inheritance. Feeling guilty for inheriting everything alone after Catherine's devoted care for our mother, I proposed the idea to my brother, who agreed. It ensured a positive relationship with his family in the future. And so, I welcomed a long-awaited baby girl. While some relatives hoped for an heir, I believe daughters tend to cherish their mothers longer in today's age. Besides, my mother, an only daughter herself, accepted a son-in-law, so if necessary, my daughter could do the same. Embracing single motherhood, I found unwavering support from Catherine, who had finished raising her own children. Grateful for her assistance during my mother's care, I felt deeply indebted to her. My brother eagerly volunteered to be a father figure for my daughter, his excitement palpable. Additionally, my brother and Catherine's 2 adult daughters, both kindergarten teachers, shared his passion for the piano, bonding with my daughter. Surrounded by such warmth and support, I felt immensely fortunate, and with gratitude, I resolved to face life's challenges head-on with my daughter by my side.
I'm sorry, honey, but the rental house is just too small for all of us tonight. Marcus said, not quite meeting my eyes as he stood in the driveway of the beautiful beachfront property we booked months ago. You and the kids will have to find somewhere else to stay. I stared at him in disbelief. Our two exhausted children slumped against me after the long drive to the Florida coast. The words made no sense. We'd specifically chosen this 4-bedroom house to have plenty of space for our family vacation. My name is Olivia, and at 34, I never imagined I'd be standing outside our $3,000 per week rental home at 9 p.m., watching my husband of 12 years essentially lock us out. Our kids, Emma, 10, and Lucas, 8, were too tired to even protest. Having endured the 8-hour drive from Atlanta with nothing but dreams of beach days ahead to sustain them. Marcus, this makes no sense, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We looked at the floor plans together. There's more than enough room. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing back at the house. Things changed. My work colleagues showed up unexpectedly. They need the space for an emergency project meeting. Work colleagues? You're a high school gym teacher. What emergency meeting requires a beach house? But he was already turning away, grabbing our suitcases from the trunk and placing them on the driveway. Here's some cash for a hotel, he said, pulling out his wallet. I'll call you tomorrow once things settle down. I looked at the measly $100 he held out. In peak season, that wouldn't even cover one night at the cheapest motel in town. If we could even find vacancy. Marcus, we can't. Mom? Emma's tired voice interrupted. I need to use the bathroom. Marcus stepped back toward the house. There's a gas station about a mile down the road. I'm sorry, but you need to leave. Now. The door closed with a decisive click, leaving us standing in the humid night air. I helped the kids into our SUV, mind racing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Through the windows of the house, I could see shadows moving, hear faint laughter that definitely didn't sound like a work meeting. Mom, I thought we were going to build sandcastles tomorrow. Lucas said, his voice small and confused. We will, sweetheart. I promise, though I had no idea how I would keep that promise. Let's just find somewhere to rest first. The nearest hotel wanted $400 for their last available room. The next one was fully booked. The third didn't answer their phone. After an hour of desperate calls, I pulled into a beachfront parking lot, trying to figure out our next move. That's when I saw her, a woman walking along the moonlit beach, holding the hand of a little girl who looked around Emma's age. Something about her seemed familiar, though I couldn't place why. They headed toward our rental house, the same one my husband had just barred us from entering. I watched, stomach churning, as they walked right up to the front door. It opened immediately, spilling warm light onto the path. And there stood Marcus, greeting them with the kind of embrace that told me everything I needed to know about his work meeting. Mom, Emma's voice came from the back seat, more alert now. Isn't that Dad's friend Melissa? The one from his phone? My blood ran cold. Melissa. The name I'd seen pop up on his phone too many times over the past year, always dismissed with excuses about parent-teacher conferences or school events. Now here she was, walking into our vacation rental with her daughter while we sat in the parking lot with nowhere to go. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, tears threatening to fall. But I couldn't cry, not now, not in front of the kids. They needed me to be strong, to figure this out. I reached for my phone, scrolling through contacts until I found the one person who might be able to help. Olivia? My sister Kate's voice was groggy with sleep. What's wrong? I need your help, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And I need you to help me access Marcus's email. Remember when you helped set up his accounts last Christmas? Please tell me you still have those passwords. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Give me 5 minutes, Kate said, fully awake now. And Olivia? Whatever he did, we're going to make it right. I ended the call and looked back at our rental house. Through the window, I could see Marcus, Melissa, and her daughter settling in for a cozy evening in the home I'd spent months saving for, planning every detail of what should have been our perfect family vacation. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd been quietly preparing for something like this. Not this exact scenario. I never imagined he'd be cruel enough to make his own children sleep in a car. But after finding suspicious text messages and unexplained charges on our credit card statements, I'd started documenting everything. My laptop contained a folder labeled Family Photos that actually held screenshots of every questionable transaction. Every late-night text, every unexplained absence. I even hired a private investigator last month, though I called them off when Marcus seemed to recommit to our family. Planning this vacation with enthusiasm I hadn't seen in years. Now I understood why he'd been so eager to handle all the rental arrangements himself. My phone buzzed. Kate had come through with the passwords. With trembling fingers, I logged into Marcus's email account. And there it was, months of correspondence with Melissa, planning their parallel vacation. The rental agreement showing he actually booked 6 bedrooms, not 4. Airline itineraries for Melissa and her daughter, paid for with our joint account. Mom. Lucas's sleepy voice came from the back. Can we go inside soon? I looked at my children, then at the house where their father was playing happy family with his secret girlfriend. Something inside me hardened into resolve. Yes, baby, I said, starting the car. We're going somewhere even better. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove to the nearest Bank of America branch. It was closed, of course, but the ATM would serve my purpose. I had 20 minutes until midnight, 20 minutes to act before Marcus could realize what I was about to do. Our joint account held just over $45,000, the combined savings we'd been building for the kids' college funds. Marcus had always insisted on keeping the money there instead of moving it to a dedicated education account, claiming we needed the flexibility. Now I understood why. I began withdrawing cash in $800 increments, the maximum allowed. With each transaction, I imagined Marcus's face when he discovered what I'd done. He thought he could discard us, leave his children sleeping in a car while he played house with his girlfriend. He was about to learn a very expensive lesson about consequences. My phone buzzed again, Kate sending more screenshots from Marcus's email. Dinner reservations, spa appointments, even a ring purchase from 2 weeks ago. All paid for with our family savings, all meticulously planned behind my back. I made the final withdrawal just as the clock struck midnight. The account was now empty except for $100, the same amount he tried to give us for a hotel. Poetic justice, I thought, tucking the cash into my purse. I drove to the nicest beachfront hotel in town. The one with the water park the kids had begged to visit when we first planned this trip. Marcus had claimed it was too expensive, insisting we stick to our rental house budget. Good evening, I told the front desk clerk, pulling out my credit card, my personal one, not the joint account Marcus could access. I'd like your best oceanfront suite for the week. And do you still offer those dolphin watching tours my children were asking about earlier? The clerk's eyes lit up. Yes, ma'am. Would you like me to add that to your reservation? It includes breakfast in a private cabana. Perfect, I said, smiling for what felt like the first time in hours. And one more thing, if anyone asks for us, especially a man named Marcus Bennett, we're not here. I carried Lucas to bed while Emma sleepily followed, both kids too exhausted to even notice their luxurious surroundings. As I tucked them in, my phone began buzzing with texts from Marcus. Where are you? The ATM says insufficient funds. What did you do? Answer your phone right now. I silenced the notifications and walked out onto our private balcony, breathing in the salt air. Below, I could see our rental house, its lights still on as Marcus presumably discovered the consequences of his choices. My phone buzzed one final time, an email from Kate. She found something else in Marcus's accounts, something that would ensure he could never hurt us like this again. But that would wait until morning. For now, I watched the moonlight dance on the waves, listening to my children's peaceful breathing from the next room. Tomorrow would bring chaos, confrontation, and change. But tonight we were safe, comfortable, and far from the man who thought he could discard us so easily. I smiled, thinking of the dolphin tour tickets tucked safely in my purse. Marcus had chosen his new family over us? Fine. We would have the vacation of a lifetime without him. The kids and I deserved nothing less. Morning came with a symphony of seagulls and crashing waves. I barely slept, spending most of the night reviewing the documents Kate had uncovered. Each new revelation felt like another twist of the knife Marcus had plunged into our marriage. The email Kate found wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was proof of calculated financial deception spanning years. Marcus had been systematically diverting money from our joint accounts into a private one, using it to fund a lifestyle with Melissa that our children had been denied. Private school tuition for her daughter. Weekend getaways disguised as teaching conferences, even a down payment on a condo in Tampa, waiting for the right time to leave us. I was still processing this information when Emma wandered onto the balcony, her eyes wide as she took in the ocean view. Mom, this place is amazing. But why aren't we at the other house with Dad? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Marcus again, his 20th call since midnight. This time I answered. Where is my money? He roared, not bothering with pleasantries. Our money, I corrected calmly, is being put to better use than funding your girlfriend's lifestyle. How's Melissa enjoying my rental house? The line went silent for a moment. Then his voice dripping with venom. You've lost your mind. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I replied, opening my laptop. I'm sure they'd be very interested in these bank statements showing how you've been embezzling from our children's college fund. Or maybe they'd like to see the deed to that Tampa condo you bought with Melissa 2 months ago. How did you? Did you really think Kate wouldn't keep those passwords when she set up your accounts? The same Kate who works in digital forensics. Lucas appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Mom, can we get breakfast? Of course, sweetie, I said, then back to Marcus. I have to go. Our kids are hungry. You remember them, right? The ones you made sleep in a car last night. Olivia, wait. I ended the call and took the kids down to the hotel's breakfast buffet. They were delighted by the chocolate chip pancakes and ocean view, their excitement almost making me forget the nightmare of last night. Almost. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. He just found his life insurance policy. Guess who he changed the beneficiary to last month? I excused myself from the table, stepping away to call her. Tell me everything. What Kate had discovered was the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. Marcus hadn't just been planning a new life with Melissa. He'd been systematically erasing us from his old one. The life insurance policy was just the beginning. He's been moving money around for months, Kate explained. Setting up accounts in her name, changing beneficiaries, even putting her daughter as a dependent on his teaching insurance. But here's where he messed up. He used our family email domain for everything. The same domain I helped set up and still technically administer. I watched Emma and Lucas chatting happily over their pancakes, unaware that their father had been planning to abandon them so thoroughly. Send me everything, I said. And Kate? Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she replied. There's more. Remember that private investigator you hired and called off? I found his report in your cloud storage. You might want to see what he discovered about Melissa's background. After breakfast, I settled the kids in the hotel's children's program, a full day of supervised beach activities and crafts. Then I retreated to our suite to read the PI's report. Melissa, it turned out, had quite a history. 3 previous marriages, each ending when she drained her husband's accounts and disappeared. Her daughter? A prop, borrowed from her sister to make her stories more convincing. The real kicker? Her name wasn't even Melissa. My hands were shaking as I compiled everything into a single document. The fraud, the theft, the false identity. Just as I finished, a commotion erupted in the hotel hallway. You can't stop me from seeing my kids, Marcus's voice boomed. I'm their father. I opened the door to find him facing off with hotel security, his face red with rage. Behind him stood Melissa, trying to look concerned while shooting nervous glances at the exit. Actually, I said, holding up my phone, you forfeited that right when you made them sleep in a car so you could play house with a con artist. Speaking of which, hello, Patricia. Or do you prefer Melissa? I'm sure your parole officer would love to know you've crossed state lines. The color drained from Melissa's face. Without a word, she turned and fled, leaving Marcus staring after her in confusion. What are you talking about? He demanded. I handed him the PI's report. Seems your girlfriend forgot to mention her outstanding warrants in Georgia and Florida. But don't worry, I'm sure the FBI will help you sort it all out. They're very interested in her pattern of identity theft and bank fraud. Marcus slumped against the wall, the reality of his situation finally hitting him. Olivia, I can explain. Save it for your lawyer. I cut him off. You'll be hearing from mine soon. Oh, and Marcus, the kids are having the time of their lives without you. Emma's going on a dolphin watching tour this afternoon, something you said we couldn't afford while you were buying condos for your girlfriend. I turned to the security guards. Please escort him out and add him to the do not admit list. Later that afternoon, I sat on the beach watching Emma and Lucas build sandcastles with their new friends from the kids' club. My phone kept buzzing with updates. Melissa/Patricia had been arrested trying to board a flight to Mexico. Marcus's school had placed him on administrative leave pending an investigation into misused funds. Kate had found even more evidence of his financial manipulation. But none of that mattered as much as the sound of my children's laughter carrying across the sand. They were resilient, adapting to our new reality with a strength that amazed me. Yes, there would be hard conversations ahead. Yes, our lives would change dramatically. But watching them play, I knew we would be okay. My phone buzzed one final time, an email from my lawyer. She had already filed for emergency custody and frozen all our remaining assets. But more importantly, she had uncovered something interesting about the beach house rental. The property is owned by Patricia's last victim, she wrote. He's willing to testify about how she scammed him, and he's offering to let you and the kids stay there for the remainder of your vacation, free of charge. Poetic justice. I smiled, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Tomorrow we would move into the beach house that Marcus had tried to deny us. Tomorrow we would continue building our new life without him. But tonight we would enjoy our oceanfront suite, order room service, and plan our dolphin watching adventure. Tonight we would celebrate our freedom from a man who thought he could discard us so easily. Marcus had chosen his path, thinking he held all the power. He never expected his quiet, accommodating wife to fight back. He never imagined I would not only survive his betrayal but thrive in spite of it. That evening, as I tucked the kids into their plush hotel beds, Emma asked a question that made my heart ache. Mom, is Dad ever coming back? I stroked her hair, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes, sweetie, the best thing a person can do is leave our lives. Your father made choices that hurt us, but we're going to be okay. Better than okay. Because we have each other. Lucas chimed in. Exactly, I smiled. And because we're stronger than he ever knew. After they fell asleep, I stood on the balcony again, watching the moonlight dance on the waves. The beach house that was meant to be the site of our family's destruction would instead become the launching point for our new beginning. Marcus had wanted to throw us away, but he'd only succeeded in setting us free. And as I listened to the rhythm of the ocean and my children's peaceful breathing, I knew with absolute certainty that we had already won. The vacation he tried to steal from us, it was just the beginning of our greatest adventure, a life without his lies, manipulation, and betrayal. A life where my children would learn that they deserved better than what their father had tried to give them. A life that was finally and completely our own. The day my grandmother died, I lost more than just the woman who raised me. I lost my future, my security, and my faith in family, all because my sister Amanda decided that being clever meant being cruel. I was in the garden when it happened, tending to Grandma Eleanor's prized roses. She taught me everything about them, which varieties needed more water, how to prune just right, when to cover them before frost. While Amanda was off at law school, living the high life on Grandma's money, I had stayed close to home, helping care for the woman who'd taken us in after our parents' accident. The roses look beautiful, Kate. My Aunt Susan's voice made me jump. She stood at the garden gate, her eyes red from crying. She's gone, sweetheart. About an hour ago. The pruning shears fell from my numb fingers. But I just saw her this morning. She was fine. We had tea, she told me about. Amanda was with her at the end. Susan cut in, her voice strange. She had Grandma sign some papers. My blood ran cold. What papers? 2 weeks later, I sat in our family lawyer's office, listening as Mr. Harrison read the new will, the one Amanda had somehow convinced Grandma to sign just hours before her death. And to my granddaughter Amanda, who has shown such promise in her legal studies, I leave my entire estate, including the house, investments, and the trust fund originally intended for Catherine. I couldn't breathe. The trust fund, $4 million that Grandma had set aside for me years ago, knowing I'd inherited her love of gardening and wanted to start my own landscaping business. All of it now Amanda's. This can't be right, I whispered. Grandma would never. Oh, but she did. Amanda's voice dripped satisfaction. She sat across from me in her expensive suit, every inch the polished law student. Everything's perfectly legal. I made sure of that. Mr. Harrison looked uncomfortable. The will appears properly executed, though the timing is unusual. Unusual? I stood up, anger finally breaking through my shock. She was dying. Amanda waited until she was barely conscious and what? Amanda's smile was cold. Made sound legal decisions. Protected the family assets from someone who wants to waste them on dirt and flowers. Please. I'm the one with the law degree, the one with actual potential. Grandma finally saw that. I stormed out of the office, Amanda's laughter following me. But as I drove home for now, until Amanda evicted me, a memory surfaced. One that gave me hope. It was from 3 months ago, one of our quiet evenings together while I helped Grandma sort through old photographs. "Katie girl," she'd said, using her special nickname for me, "remember the story about the missing diamond?" I did. It was one of her favorites, about how her mother had hidden her most precious diamond necklace during the Depression, leaving clues in an old book. Everyone thought it was lost forever until Grandma found it years later, exactly where the clues said it would be. Sometimes, she continued, her eyes twinkling, the most valuable things need to be hidden where only the right person will think to look. At the time, I thought she was just reminiscing. Now, I pulled into the driveway of the grand old house that had been my home since I was 8. Amanda's house now, according to the new will. But something told me Grandma Eleanor, who'd spent her life outsmarting people who underestimated her, had one last trick up her sleeve. That evening, after Amanda left for her hotel, she wouldn't move in until I was gone, of course. I went to the library. The room was a maze of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves containing everything from first editions to gardening manuals. I went straight to the worn copy of The Secret Garden, Grandma's favorite book, and the first one she'd read to me after my parents died. Inside the front cover was her familiar handwriting. "For my Katie girl, who understands that the most precious gardens are the ones we tend with love." Below that, in writing that looked shaky but determined, dated just 1 week before her death, "The real treasure is hidden where the roses bloom in winter." My hands trembled as I closed the book. The roses that bloom in winter. Amanda would never understand the reference, but I did. In the greenhouse, there was a special section where Grandma grew her winter roses, a rare variety that bloomed to spite the cold. And under those roses, I practically ran to the greenhouse, fumbling with the key she'd given me years ago. In the back corner, the winter roses were still blooming, their pale pink petals ghostly in the moonlight. It took me an hour of careful digging, not wanting to damage the precious plants. Finally, my fingers hit something solid, a metal box, sealed against the elements. Inside was a document, a will, dated 1 month before her death, witnessed by her doctor and banker. And with it, a letter. "My dearest Katie, if you're reading this, then Amanda has done exactly what I feared she might. Her father, your Uncle Richard, was the same way. Always taking, never understanding the value of growing things. This is my true will. The one Amanda made me sign won't stand against it. I've left instructions with my old friend Judge Morris, along with evidence of any undue influence Amanda might have used. The trust fund is yours, as it was always meant to be. The house, too. Amanda has her own trust from her father's side, though she conveniently never mentioned that, did she? Plant your gardens, my darling girl. Grow beautiful things. And remember that sometimes the best revenge against clever people is to be wise instead. All my love, Grandma Eleanor." I sat there in the greenhouse, surrounded by the roses we tended together, holding the proof that my grandmother had outsmarted the lawyer-to-be who thought she knew everything. Tomorrow, I'd take the will to Judge Morris. Tonight, I'd let Amanda enjoy her apparent victory, let her think her legal tricks had won. Grandma always said the best gardens require patience. Sometimes justice does too. I carefully replaced the earth around the winter roses, making sure they were settled properly. As I worked, I could almost hear Grandma's voice. "Remember, Katie girl, roses have thorns for a reason. Sometimes the most delicate things are also the best at defending themselves." She'd known Amanda would try something like this, and she prepared. Not with legal tricks or deft manipulation, but with wisdom and love and trust in the granddaughter who understood her best. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, I had the roses, the real will, and the knowledge that Grandma's last act had been to protect not just me, but the values she'd spent her life teaching me. Amanda thought being clever meant knowing the law. But Grandma had taught me that true wisdom means knowing people's hearts. And in the end, that wisdom had proven stronger than all my sister's legal tricks. I locked up the greenhouse, the metal box secure in my bag. In her hotel room across town, Amanda was probably celebrating her victory, imagining all the ways she'd spend her stolen inheritance. Let her celebrate. The best victories are the ones you never see coming. The next morning, I arrived at Judge Morris's chambers, clutching both the metal box and a bouquet of winter roses. His secretary's eyes widened when I gave my name. Miss Catherine, the judge has been expecting you. He said to send you in immediately if you ever came. Judge Morris was exactly as Grandma had described him, tall, distinguished, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood as I entered, looking at the roses with understanding. Eleanor's winter roses, he said softly. So you found it. I placed the metal box on his desk. You knew? He nodded, settling back into his chair. Your grandmother came to me a month before she passed. She knew Amanda was planning something. The new trust fund documents your sister had been reviewing for her. They were a red flag. He opened the box, examining the will and accompanying documents. Eleanor was no fool. She kept detailed records of every conversation with Amanda over the past year. The subtle pressure, the manipulative suggestions, the convenient legal advice about changing her will. Will it be enough? I asked. To invalidate the deathbed will? Judge Morris smiled. More than enough. But Eleanor wanted to wait to let Amanda show her true colors first. She said, and I quote, sometimes you have to let the weeds grow tall enough to pull them out by the roots. 2 hours later, I sat in the main conference room of Harrison & Associates, watching Amanda stride in with her usual confident smirk. Her new designer handbag probably cost more than my car, no doubt purchased with what she thought was her new inheritance. Really, Kate, she sighed, seeing me. More legal challenges? I thought I explained this clearly. The will is ironclad. Is it? Judge Morris's voice made her spin around. He stood in the doorway, holding the metal box. Perhaps we should discuss the actual ironclad will, the one your grandmother prepared when she was of sound mind and body, not hours from death. Amanda's face went pale. What is this? Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. Amanda, you might want to sit down for this. The next hour was a masterclass in justice. Judge Morris methodically went through every document, the real will, Grandma's detailed records of Amanda's manipulation, statements from the doctor about her mental state in her final hours. This is ridiculous, Amanda interrupted, but her voice shook. That will isn't valid. I made sure. She stopped, realizing what she just admitted. Made sure of what? Judge Morris asked mildly. That your grandmother was too weak to resist when you pressured her to sign a new will. The one you had prepared in advance, just waiting for the right moment. I deserved that inheritance, Amanda shouted, her polished facade cracking. I'm the one with the law degree, the one with real plans. Kate just wants to play in the dirt like some glorified gardener. Your grandmother, Judge Morris said firmly, wanted her estate used to create beautiful things, not fund a lifestyle of manipulation and greed. She chose Catherine because she saw in her the same values she held dear. This isn't over, Amanda snarled, grabbing her designer bag. I'll fight this. You'll what? I finally spoke. Use your legal knowledge, the knowledge you used to manipulate a dying woman. By the way, Grandma knew about your other trust fund, the one from Uncle Richard. Amanda froze. How did she? She had better lawyers than you, Judge Morris smiled. Ones with ethics. That trust fund is quite substantial, isn't it? More than enough to fund your real plans without stealing from your sister. Watching Amanda's face, I finally understood what Grandma had meant about letting weeds grow tall enough to pull out either roots. My sister had revealed exactly who she was, and now she couldn't hide it anymore. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Amanda's deathbed will was invalidated. The real will was verified and executed. And my sister, well, she did what she'd always done when things didn't go her way. She ran. Last I heard, she'd taken a job at a corporate law firm in Chicago, probably plotting her next clever scheme. But she'd lost more than just the inheritance. She'd lost any claim to Grandma's legacy, the house, the gardens, the respect of everyone who'd known Eleanor Mills. I stood in the greenhouse, tending to the winter roses that had protected Grandma's real will. The trust fund was being transferred to my accounts. But that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that I could finally start building what Grandma and I had planned together. The landscaping business would focus on creating sustainable gardens, teaching people to grow beautiful things even in unlikely places. like winter roses blooming despite the cold. Miss Catherine, my new assistant Sarah poked her head in. The contractors are here to discuss the education center plans. I smiled, remembering Grandma's vision, using part of the estate to create a place where children could learn about gardening, about patience, about helping things grow. Tell them I'll be right there, just finishing up with the roses. As I gathered my tools, I spotted something carved into the greenhouse wall, hidden behind a climbing vine. Grandma's handwriting. For my Katie girl, remember that the most valuable things we grow are not the flowers themselves, but the wisdom to nurture them, the patience to wait for them, and the love to share them. Never let the clever people make you doubt your kind of wisdom. I touched the words gently. Amanda had thought she was so smart, using legal tricks to steal what she wanted. But Grandma had understood a deeper truth, that real wealth isn't just about money. It's about values, about growing things that last, about leaving the world more beautiful than you found it. The contractors were waiting to help me build something new, something that would honor Grandma's legacy in a way Amanda's legal schemes never could. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving someone wrong. It's proving yourself right. I locked up the greenhouse, patting the winter roses one last time. They'd done their job, protecting Grandma's real will until the right moment. Now it was my turn to protect her legacy, to grow it into something even more beautiful. Amanda had wanted to take everything, thinking that cleverness was enough. But Grandma had known better. She trusted that wisdom, patience, and love would win in the end. And as always, Grandma had been right. 1 year after finding Grandma's real will, I stood in the transformed backyard of the estate, watching as dozens of children planted their first seeds in the new learning gardens. The Eleanor Mills Garden Education Center was everything Grandma and I had dreamed of, and more. Miss Kate. 7-year-old Tommy ran up, his hands covered in soil. My sunflower is taller than Billy's. Remember what we learned about gardening? I knelt beside him. It's not about being better than someone else's flower. It's about helping your own grow strong. He nodded seriously. Like your grandma's winter roses? Exactly like that. The winter roses had become something of a legend among the students. I propagated them carefully, creating a special section where they bloomed year-round, reminding me daily of Grandma's wisdom. Sarah approached, tablet in hand. The magazine crew is here for the interview, and there's something else you should see. She handed me her tablet, open to a legal news website. The headline made my stomach clench. Rising star attorney disbarred for ethical violations. The photo showed Amanda being escorted from her Chicago law office, clutching her designer bag like a shield. According to the article, she'd been caught falsifying documents in a major corporate case, the same trick she tried to use with Grandma's will, but this time with less success. Her firm is pressing charges, Sarah added quietly. They're saying this wasn't her first offense. I handed back the tablet, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Part of me was sad for my sister, whose cleverness had finally outsmarted itself. But another part remembered her smirk as she tried to steal my inheritance, her contempt for everything Grandma valued. Miss Kate. Tommy tugged my sleeve. Can we water the roses now? Of course, sweetie. The roses always come first. But life has a way of bringing things full circle. 3 days later, I found Amanda sitting on the front steps of the estate, looking nothing like the polished lawyer who tried to steal my inheritance. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smeared. Come to gloat? She asked bitterly. Actually, I'm here to tend the gardens. You know, playing in the dirt as you called it. She flinched. I lost everything, Kate. My job, my reputation, my future. Like you tried to take everything from me. That was different. I had plans, ambitions. And I didn't. I gestured at the thriving education center, the new greenhouses, the lines of children eagerly learning about nature. This was my ambition, Amanda. Creating something that helps things grow, including people. I need help, she whispered. Money, a place to stay. I'm your sister. I looked at her for a long moment, remembering Grandma's words about wisdom versus cleverness. You're right, you are my sister, which is why I'm going to help you, but not the way you want. What do you mean? There's a position open here. Assistant gardener, working with the children's program. Room and board included, modest salary. Hard work, dirty hands, and a chance to learn what Grandma tried to teach us both. You want me to be your gardener? She sounded horrified. I'm a lawyer, or I was. No, I want you to learn what real growth looks like, to understand why Grandma chose me to carry on her legacy. Take it or leave it. She stared at the ground for a long time. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, when do I start? The next few months were interesting. Amanda struggled with the physical work, complained about the early mornings, and initially treated the children like annoying obstacles. But gradually, something changed. I found her one evening in the winter rose section, carefully removing dead leaves from the plants. "They're so delicate," she said, not looking at me. "But strong too. I never understood before what Grandma saw in them." "What she saw in you." Amanda's hands stilled on the roses. "I thought being clever was enough, that knowing the law meant I could take whatever I wanted. But watching you here, seeing what you've built." "It's what we've built," I corrected her. "Grandma's legacy." She finally turned to face me, eyes shining with tears. "I found this." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, in one of Grandma's old books. It was a photo of us as children before our parents' accident. Amanda and I were in Grandma's garden, both covered in mud, laughing as we planted marigolds. "We were both gardeners once," I said softly. "Think I could be one again." I handed her a pair of pruning shears. "Winter roses need careful handling. Want to learn?" As I taught my sister the proper way to tend the roses that had saved her from her own worst instincts, I thought about Grandma's final lesson. Sometimes the things we try to take by force only come to us when we're ready to nurture them instead. Amanda had wanted to steal an inheritance. Instead, she was finally inheriting what really mattered, the wisdom to help things grow. The children started calling her Miss Mandy, delighting in teaching her what they'd learned about patience, care, and the joy of seeing something bloom against the odds. And in the greenhouse, where winter roses still guarded their long-ago secret, two sisters learned to grow something new from the roots of the past. Grandma would have liked that. After all, she'd always said the best gardens have room for every kind of flower, even the ones that take a little longer to bloom. I was 12 when I first learned I was the wrong gender for my family's legacy. It was career day at school, and I proudly told my class I would one day run Mitchell Manufacturing just like my father. That night, I overheard my parents talking. "She's got such a head for business," Richard, my mother, said. "You should see how she lights up when you talk about the company." My father's response was immediate. "It doesn't matter. The company goes to David. That's tradition. Girls don't run manufacturing companies." 15 years later, I stood in my brother's office, our father's old office, watching him sign the paperwork that would fire me from the company I'd given my life to. "Nothing personal, Emma," David smirked, sliding the papers across his desk. "But let's be honest, you're not cut out for this. Maybe start a cute little boutique, something more feminine." I kept my face neutral as I signed, remembering every sacrifice I had made. The Stanford MBA, the countless late nights, the supply chain innovations that had boosted profits by 40% last year. None of it mattered. I had the wrong chromosomes. "Clear out your desk by end of day," David added, already turning back to his phone. "And Emma, Dad was right. Girls don't belong in manufacturing." I walked out with my head high, past employees who wouldn't meet my eyes, past the systems I built, which David had spent the last year dismantling in favor of his golf buddies' half-baked ideas. In my office, mine for one more hour, I packed up 15 years of work, photos, awards, business plans Dad had never read. And at the bottom of a drawer, I found something that made me smile for the first time that day. A list of every supplier, contractor, and logistics company Mitchell Manufacturing depended on, along with their contract renewal dates. David had never cared about the relationships I had built, the trust I had earned, the favors I was owed. A shadow fell across my doorway. Marcus Chen, head of logistics. His expression told me he knew exactly what had happened. "Need help with those boxes?" I shook my head. "I'm fine, Marcus. But remember that conversation we had last month about starting our own logistics company?" He nodded slowly. "You mean the one where you mentioned having enough capital to buy out 3 major shipping contractors?" I pulled up an email draft I prepared months ago when I first saw this day coming. "How would you like to be COO of Summit Logistics? Incorporated last week. Fully funded. Ready to start operations." His eyes widened as he scanned the business plan. "Emma, this could control the entire regional supply chain. If you got the right contracts." "You mean the ones up for renewal?" The ones David doesn't even know are expiring. Understanding dawned on his face. You've been planning this. For years, I admitted. Why fight for a seat at their table when I can build my own? Over the next 2 hours, more visitors arrived. Sarah from accounting passed over for a promotion in favor of David's friend. James from operations ignored when you warned about quality control issues. One by one, they accepted job offers from Summit Logistics. By the time security arrived to escort me out, my team was in place. My plan was in motion. David called after me from his office. Goodbye, Emma. Some people just aren't meant for real business. I smiled, knowing it would infuriate him. Goodbye, David. Give my best to Hansen Shipping. While you still can. The confusion on his face was priceless. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by the silly girl thoughts that would soon revolutionize regional logistics. My phone buzzed. Jack Hansen, CEO of Hansen Shipping, confirming our Monday meeting. I looked at the old photo on my desk. Dad standing proudly beside David, his hand on his son's shoulder. Me slightly off to the side. Always edge out of the frame. Girls don't run manufacturing companies, Dad had said. He was right. I wouldn't be running a manufacturing company. I'd be running the entire supply chain they couldn't survive without. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of panicked texts from David. I ignored them, focusing instead on the Hansen Shipping contract spread across my new conference table. Emma, this is brilliant, Jack Hansen said, reviewing our proposal. Real-time tracking, optimized routes, consolidated shipping lanes. This could cut costs by 30%. The same proposal I gave Mitchell Manufacturing last quarter, I said, before they dismissed it as overcomplicating things. Their loss, our gain. Jack signed with a flourish. Summit Logistics is now our exclusive regional partner. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. I picked up. What the hell did you do? David's voice was shrill. Hansen just canceled our contract. Did they? How unfortunate. I heard they signed with some new logistics company. Summit something. You're behind this. Behind what, David? A better business model? Isn't that what you called real business? The stream of profanity that followed was cut short when I hung up. I had more meetings to attend. By Wednesday, we secured 5 more contracts. Thursday, we acquired the region's largest warehousing operation. Friday, we announced our new supply chain management system, the same one David had dismissed months ago. Mitchell Manufacturing stock dropped 15% today. Marcus reported, handing me my afternoon coffee. Investors are panicking over supply chain instability. Just wait until next week, I said. Phase 2 begins Monday. It was beautiful in its simplicity. We didn't just control shipping now, we were about to control raw materials. The contracts I had quietly cultivated over years were all coming due within weeks. David never saw it coming. But he would. Soon. Emergency board meeting, Sarah announced, skimming her tablet. Mitchell Manufacturing is in crisis. Unprecedented supply chain disruptions. Their words, not mine. I could picture it perfectly. David, pacing the office he stole, fumbling for excuses as furious board members demanded answers. He blamed everyone but himself, never realizing his own arrogance had created his worst nightmare. The next few weeks were a masterclass in strategic dismantling. Every supplier Mitchell Manufacturing approached, we offered a better deal. Every shipping route they tried to secure, we optimized a competing one. Piece by piece, the empire they took for granted crumbled. Then finally, the call I'd been expecting. Emma, my mother's voice was hesitant. We need to talk. I let the silence stretch. About? The company. Which one, Mom? Mitchell Manufacturing or Summit Logistics? Because only one of them is thriving. A pause. Your father, he never meet. Never meant what? I cut in, to dismiss every idea I had, to hand the company to David just because he was a man, to let him run it into the ground while he ignored every warning. More silence. Then softly, the board meeting is tomorrow. David, he's going to lose his position. The shareholders are furious. I almost laughed. Sounds like a personnel issue. Nothing to do with me. Please, Emma, he's your brother. Funny, he wasn't my brother when he was firing me and mocking my business ideas. I hung up, no regret, no second thoughts. But her words lingered. not because I felt any obligation to save David, but because tomorrow's board meeting wouldn't just mark my victory. It would determine whether I settled for winning or claimed total dominance. I picked up my phone. Jack, remember that expansion plan we discussed? Move it up. We announce it at 9 a.m. tomorrow. The next morning, I watched the Mitchell Manufacturing Board meeting via video link, an easy arrangement when you control a company's entire communications infrastructure. David looked terrible. His usual crisp suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He stood before the board, floundering as he tried to explain Mitchell's 40% drop in value. We're exploring alternative supply chain options, he stammered, reaching out to new partners. There are no new partners, a board member interrupted. Summit Logistics has locked up the entire regional network. They just announced a $200 million expansion. Face it, David, we're dead in the water. David tugged at his collar. Maybe we could reach out to Summit. Try to negotiate. The boardroom door opened. Oh, now you want to negotiate? Every head turned. I stepped inside, my Summit Logistics ID badge gleaming. Dad half rose from his chair. Emma, what are you doing here? I smiled, representing the only company in this room that actually knows how to run a business. David's face darkened. You planned this. You sabotaged us. I shook my head. No, David. I built something better. Something you could have had, if you hadn't been so convinced that girls don't belong in business. I laid out my offer. Fair, more than fair, really. Summit would absorb all employees, preserve the Mitchell name on key product lines, and ensure the company's legacy continued. Just not under David. All in favor? The board chairman asked. The vote was unanimous. Even Dad, looking resigned, raised his hand. David lurched to his feet. This isn't right. Dad, tell them. Dad's voice was heavy. It's over, son. He turned to me. Emma, I was wrong. About everything. I met his gaze without flinching. Yes, you were. Then I turned to leave, but paused. Oh, and David, don't bother packing your office. I had it cleared out this morning. Try not to feel too bad. Some people just aren't meant for real business. His own words thrown back at him. The perfect ending to a plan 15 years in the making. That evening, I sat in my real office, earned through skill, not chromosomes. Framed on the wall was my first act as CEO. Mitchell Manufacturing's stock certificate. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Your father is here. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. The company, he started, is thriving, I finished. No thanks to your outdated ideas about who should run it. He exhaled. I'm sorry. I arched a brow. For what? Not believing in me. Dismissing me? Handing the company to David without a second thought? Each accusation landed like a weight. For all of it, he admitted. For underestimating you. For thinking talent had anything to do with gender. I studied him, searching for insincerity. I found none. Well, I said finally, at least you're learning. He nodded. I am. Then, hesitating. That's actually why I came. I want you to meet someone. A young woman rolled in beside him, a wheelchair-bound engineer with sharp eyes and an air of quiet brilliance. Emma, this is Jessica Chen, Dad said, a manufacturing prodigy from MIT. I thought you should hear her out. I raised an eyebrow, and why is that? He actually blushed, because when I saw her proposals, I realized something. I remembered all the ideas of yours I never read, and I didn't want to make the same mistake twice. Jessica looked nervous but determined. Mr. Mitchell said you might be interested in my AI integration models for production efficiency. I smiled. I am, but first, tell me about yourself. Not your gender, not your disability, just your vision for the future of manufacturing. Her eyes lit up. As she launched into her ideas, I caught Dad watching us, pride and regret warring on his face. Later that night, Mom stopped by my office. I saw David today. How's customer service treating him? I smirked. She sighed. He's humbled, and he wanted me to give you this. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Emma, I spent years believing I deserved success just because of who I was. You proved that success is earned. You built something incredible, and you beat me fair and square. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I will say this. I see it now. I see you now. I'm proud of you. David asterisk asterisk. I exhaled slowly, folding the letter. I didn't need his pride. But maybe, just maybe, I'd appreciated it. Smiling, I turned back to my desk. There was still work to do. After all, this empire wasn't going to build itself. And now everyone knew exactly whose hands it belonged in. I read the letter twice, then picked up my phone. David, be in my office tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. Bring your customer service reports and any real ideas you've gathered from actually listening to our clients. The next morning he walked in. Gone was the overconfident CEO swagger. In its place was something quieter, humbled. Sit down, I said. Tell me what you've learned. For the next hour, David laid out a detailed analysis of customer complaints, supply chain inefficiencies, and possible solutions. He hadn't just done the work, he'd understood it. Not bad, I said when he finished. How would you like to head up our new customer experience division? His eyes widened. You trust me with that. Trust is earned, just like leadership. Just like respect. That's how this company works now. And it did. Over the next year, Mitchell Manufacturing became something neither Dad nor David had ever envisioned. Jessica's AI-driven production systems transformed our efficiency. David's customer-first strategies rebuilt our reputation. Summit Logistics remained an industry powerhouse. But the real transformation, that happened in the company's culture. Walk into any Mitchell Manufacturing facility now, and you'll find leadership built on talent, not tradition. You'll see Jessica mentoring a new generation of engineers, David working alongside her, learning instead of dictating, and Dad, semi-retired, but still watching with something between pride and regret. Your latest article's making waves, Marcus said one morning, tossing a magazine onto my desk. The cover showed me standing on the factory floor. The headline read, The Manufacturing Maven. How Emma Mitchell revolutionized an industry while breaking glass ceilings. Marcus grinned. Best part is the sidebar about our mentorship program. The Mitchell Future Leaders Program, my passion project. It opened doors for brilliant minds often overlooked due to gender, disability, or background. Like Jessica, who was now guiding pre-promising engineering students. Dad called it expensive charity at first, I mused, until he saw the innovations coming out of it. Speaking of Dad, Marcus gestured toward my office door. He stood there, holding a familiar leather portfolio, the same one that had once contained my business proposals, the ones he'd ignored. I found these while cleaning out my old office, he said quietly. Finally read them. They were brilliant, Emma. They still are. I'm sorry I couldn't see that sooner. I took the portfolio, flipping through the ideas that had built my empire. Want to hear my latest proposal? Expanding the mentorship program internationally. He sat down, eyes filled with something I'd never seen before. Respect. Tell me everything. And so I did. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving someone wrong. It's proving yourself right. Again and again. Until even the deepest prejudices crumble under the weight of undeniable success. David stops by my office every Friday now, not as the entitled hare he once was, but as someone who finally understands what real leadership means. You know what I realized, he said one afternoon. When Dad said, girls don't belong in business, he wasn't just wrong about you. He was wrong about business itself. It's not about gender or control. It's about vision, I finished. About building something that lasts. About recognizing talent, wherever you find it. He nodded. Thanks for teaching me that, even if your method was dramatic. I smiled, thinking back to the day I took his company from him. Some lessons are meant to hurt. On my office wall, my old termination papers still hang beside my stock certificates, but now they're surrounded by something even more important, photos of our diverse leadership team, of our mentees of the future we're building. And in one, David and I stand side by side on the factory floor, not as rivals, but as leaders. Because the greatest victory isn't just proving someone wrong about you. It's helping them be right about everything else. The Anderson retail headquarters gleamed in the morning sun, 50 stories of glass and steel reaching into the Chicago skyline. I stood in my brother Mark's new office, formerly our father's office, and tried to keep my expression neutral as he delivered the news of my termination. My name is Sarah Anderson, and at 33, I had just watched my family's legacy, my life's work, and my revolutionary retail management system be stolen by my own brother. It's nothing personal, Sarah, Mark said, leaning back in Dad's leather chair, the same chair where our father had sat 6 months ago, before his stroke, telling me how proud he was of my innovations. The board feels the company needs stronger leadership in the tech division. I glanced at the digital clock on his desk, 9:47 a.m. In exactly 24 hours, he would be presenting his new retail management system to the board. The system I'd spent 3 years developing. The system that could revolutionize how major retailers handle everything from inventory to customer data. Of course, I said mildly, I understand completely. Mark's smile faltered slightly. He'd expected tears, protests, maybe even threats. After all, I was the emotional one in the family, according to him. The one who cared too much about employees, who wanted to revolutionize retail for more than just profit. Security will escort you to clear out your office, he continued, regaining his composure. Standard procedure, you understand. We wouldn't want any sensitive information leaving the building. I thought about the small camera hidden in my office plant, the one that had been recording his late-night meetings for the past 3 months. The midnight conversations with board members, the promises of increased profits if they supported his takeover, the methodical way he planned to steal my work and push me out. Of course not, I agreed. Though I'm sure you've already secured all the important files. Everything related to the new system is safely under company control, he said smugly. Your personal access has been revoked. He meant the official servers, the documented development files. What he didn't know about was the hidden backend I'd built into the system, the fail-safes I'd implemented when I first noticed files being copied late at night. Congratulations on the presentation tomorrow, I said, standing up. I'm sure the board will be very impressed. They will be, he said, then added with fake sympathy, I know this is hard, but you'll land on your feet. Maybe a smaller company would be more your speed. Somewhere less demanding. I shouldered my bag, thinking about the encrypted drive in my apartment containing footage of every meeting where he'd plotted this takeover. You're probably right. Anderson Retail might be too big for someone like me. The security guard, Jim, who'd watched me grow up in this building, gave me an apologetic look as he escorted me to my office. This isn't right, Miss Sarah, he muttered. It's okay, Jim, I said as I began packing my personal items. Everything happens for a reason. My office overlooked Michigan Avenue, the same view I'd had since joining the company fresh out of MIT. While the security guard wasn't looking, I quickly retrieved the hidden camera from the Peace Lily, Dad's gift when I was promoted to head of technology 3 years ago. Need help with those boxes, Miss Sarah? Jim asked as I finished packing. No thanks, Jim, but could you do me a favor? Could you make sure my plant gets a good home? Maybe in the security office? It needs water every 3 days. Jim nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd been here 30 years, had seen the way things had changed since Dad's stroke. I'll take good care of it, he promised. In the elevator, I checked my phone. 3 messages from Lisa, my lead developer. They're locking us out of the system. Mark's team is taking over everything. What do we do? I typed back, stick to the plan. See you at the usual place tonight. The lobby was busy with morning traffic, employees hurrying to their offices, unaware that the company they worked for was about to change forever. Janet, the receptionist who'd given me candy when I visited Dad as a child, wiped away tears as I handed in my security badge. This isn't what your father would have wanted, she whispered. I know, I said. But sometimes things have to break before they can be fixed properly. Outside, Chicago's spring air was crisp and full of promise. I walked to the corner where my car was parked, placed my box of belongings in the trunk, and pulled out my other phone, the secure one that even Mark didn't know about. A text from my contact at the SEC. Documentation received. Extremely interesting reading. Meeting still on for 3 p.m. Confirmed, I replied, bringing additional evidence. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing the video footage from the hidden camera. Mark's face glowed with triumph as he outlined his plan to various board members. Sarah's too soft for this business. The system needs a stronger hand. Think of the profit margins if we implement it my way. Of course, I developed the core concepts. I just let her handle the technical details. My laptop pinged, An alert from the hidden backend I built into the system. Mark's team was trying to modify the source code, probably removing my digital fingerprints. Little did they know that every change they made was being logged, every attempt to alter the documentation creating an unalterable record of their tampering. My phone buzzed. Lisa calling. Everyone's in position, she reported. The team is ready. But Sarah, are you sure about this? Once we do this. There's no going back, I finished. I know, but Mark left us no choice. He's not just stealing my work, he's planning to turn the system into something it was never meant to be. Something that would hurt thousands of employees, millions of customers. Your father would be proud, Lisa said quietly. I looked at the photo on my wall. Dad and me at my MIT graduation, his face beaming with pride. He'd built Anderson Retail from a single store into a national chain, but he'd never lost sight of what mattered. The people who made it work. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, I said. Make sure everyone's ready. After hanging up, I walked to my home office and opened the hidden wall safe. Inside was the evidence I'd been gathering for months. Financial records showing Mark's manipulation of company funds, documentation of his secret meetings with competitors, and most importantly, the original development logs of my retail management system. I pulled out Dad's letter, the one he'd written just before his stroke, the one Mark didn't know existed. Tomorrow, its contents would change everything. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my best suit, the one Dad had bought me when I became head of technology. As I fastened my mother's pearl necklace, I thought about legacy, about responsibility, about the right way to run a business. My phone buzzed. Board meeting starts in 1 hour. Everything is in place. I smiled at my reflection. Mark thought he'd won, thought he'd successfully stolen everything I built. He had no idea that his moment of triumph was about to become something very different. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth. It's letting your enemies present their own lies to the very people they're trying to deceive. I grabbed my laptop and headed for the door. It was time to show my brother exactly who he'd underestimated. Anderson Retail's main conference room was packed with board members, executives, and major shareholders. I slipped in quietly just as Mark began his presentation, taking a seat at the back where my brother's triumph would have the perfect view of its own undoing. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark began, standing at the head of the long table in an expertly tailored suit. Today marks a new era for Anderson Retail. What I'm about to show you will revolutionize not just our company, but the entire retail industry. I opened my laptop silently, connecting to the room's wireless network. Lisa's text appeared. Backend access confirmed. Ready when you are. This retail management system, Mark continued, clicking to his first slide, represents thousands of hours of development, a seamless integration of inventory management, customer data, and predictive analytics. My fingers moved across the keyboard, accessing the hidden protocols I built into the system. On the screen behind Mark, his presentation continued flawlessly. He had no idea that every click was being logged, every demonstration creating an unalterable record. The potential for profit maximization is unprecedented, he said, warming to his theme. By implementing aggressive data collection and dynamic pricing, we can increase margins by up to 40%. Several board members nodded approvingly. They didn't understand that what Mark was proposing would turn my system, designed to balance efficiency with ethical business practices, into a tool for exploiting both employees and customers. Question, called out Janet Chen, one of the newer board members. The privacy implications of this level of data collection are completely manageable, Mark interrupted smoothly. The technical details aren't important right now. What matters is the bottom line. I pressed enter. On my screen, a message flashed. Original documentation uploaded. Timestamp development logs active. Let me demonstrate the system's capabilities, Mark said, turning to the main display. He clicked confidently, expecting to show a carefully curated demo. Instead, the screen shifted to show side-by-side comparisons. The original ethical design specifications I'd developed, next to Mark's modified versions showing how he planned to exploit the system. What? Mark clicked frantically, but the presentation was no longer under his control. Interesting modifications, I said, standing up. All heads turned, especially the parts where you removed all the employee protection protocols and customer privacy safeguards. There must be a technical glitch, Mark stammered. Security. They can't help, I said calmly. The system is responding exactly as it was designed to, by me, its original creator. The room erupted in murmurs. I walked to the front, each step measured and confident. Board members of Anderson Retail, I began, what my brother has shown you is a corrupted version of a system I spent 3 years developing. A system designed to modernize retail while protecting the rights of employees and customers. A system our father approved and supported. She's lying, Mark snapped. I developed. Really? I pressed another key. The hidden camera footage began playing. Mark in late-night meetings, plotting his takeover, admitting to stealing my work. That's illegal surveillance, he sputtered. Actually, said a new voice from the doorway, it's evidence in a federal investigation. Special Agent Sarah Torres from the SEC stepped into the room, followed by 2 colleagues. Mark Anderson, we have some questions about certain financial transactions related to this software development. Mark's face went from red to white. This is ridiculous. I am the CEO. According to company bylaws, interrupted Howard Chen, the head of the board's legal committee, your interim CEO, pending review after your father's recovery. He held up a document. A recovery that, according to his doctors, has progressed significantly. In fact, we received this letter from him this morning. I smiled, remembering Dad's face when I visited him at the rehabilitation center last week, showing him the evidence of Mark's betrayal. His hand had been steady as he'd signed the letter revoking Mark's interim authority. The original system documentation, I said, distributing tablets to the board members, shows exactly how the development proceeded. You'll also find evidence of how Mark attempted to modify it for unethical purposes, along with records of his financial misconduct. The board members scrolled through the documents, their expressions darkening. Mark looked around wildly, finding no allies. You don't understand, he tried. The profit potential is substantial even without exploiting people, I cut in. The system as originally designed would increase efficiency by 30% while improving employee satisfaction and customer loyalty. I have 3 years of test data proving it. Which is why, Howard Chen said, the board will be calling an emergency session to review leadership of both the company and this project. The next hour was a blur of SEC interviews, board discussions, and security escorting Mark from the building. I sat in Dad's office, Mark's office for such a short time, looking at the city sprawled below. Miss Sarah. Jim the security guard stood at the door. Your father's here. Dad walked in slowly, leaning on his cane, but his eyes were clear and sharp. I always knew, he said, settling into his old chair, that you were the one who truly understood this business. The way you built it, I said, not just for profit, but for people. He nodded. Mark never understood that. Success without ethics isn't success at all. The next few weeks were intense. The board unanimously voted to reinstate Dad as CEO, with me as Chief Technology Officer and heir apparent. Mark faced SEC investigations and criminal charges. The system rollout proceeded as originally designed, earning praise from both industry analysts and workers' rights groups. 1 month after the board meeting, I sat in my new office, not Dad's, but one with an even better view of the city. Lisa knocked on the door. The first quarter results are in, she announced, grinning. Employee satisfaction up 42%. Customer retention improved by 35%. And profits, she paused dramatically, exceeded all projections. Send them to Mark, I said, in his new office. The Federal Investigation Office. He never understood. I said that doing the right thing could also be the profitable thing. Dad stopped by later that day, moving better now after months of rehabilitation. Your mother would be proud, he said, looking at her picture on my desk. She always said you had my head for business and her heart for people. I thought about legacy then, not just the buildings and profits, but the impact we have on lives. Mark had wanted to build an empire. I wanted to build something that mattered. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at a retail industry conference. The topic? Ethical innovation, the future of retail technology. I thought about Mark sitting in his prison cell after his conviction for fraud and corporate espionage and realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so meaningful that their attempts to destroy it only make it stronger. The Anderson retail headquarters still gleams in the morning sun. But it's different now. Employees smile more. Customers praise our service. The board talks about ethics as much as profits. And every morning, when I walk through the lobby, Janet still offers me candy, just like she did when I was a little girl who dreamed of making her father proud. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the moment of triumph, but in what you build after the battle is won. Mark tried to steal my work, but he could never steal my vision. Because true success isn't just about power or profit. It's about creating something that makes the world a little better than you found it. That's what Dad taught me. That's what I proved. And that's the real legacy I'll carry forward. The security camera footage from my office plant still sits in my safe, a reminder that sometimes the best defense against betrayal is simply letting people reveal their true nature. But I don't watch it anymore. I'm too busy building something better. After all, success is the best revenge, but only if you succeed in the right way. And as I review plans for expanding our ethical retail system nationwide, I know that the right way was worth fighting for. Because in the end, it's not about who wins or loses. It's about how you change the game itself.
Today we have a corporate event. I have to go. Kevin sighed insincerely, informing his wife as he prepared for work in the morning. The boss came up with the idea to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of our company. It's not even a significant date. What's got into his head? You only found out about this today? Lisa asked in surprise. I would have at least gone to the hairdresser, had my hair done. Oh well, I'll quickly curl my hair, it'll look nice. What does your hairstyle have to do with it? Her husband exclaimed in bewilderment. I'm going alone. Mr. Rodney is only inviting his employees. No wives or girlfriends, so sorry I can't take you with me. Lisa remained silent, though she felt offended. Look at him, twisting things around, claiming everyone will be there without their partners. Well, well, as they say, the tale is fresh, but difficult to believe. Lately, my dear husband has been reluctant to go out with me. He always comes up with one excuse or another. Well, here's my chance to use my secret weapon and test my husband's loyalty to the family values. I didn't prepare for nothing. And the weapon, as she called it, had been prepared in advance. Doubts about her husband's fidelity had been gnawing at her for a long time. Any woman can sense her partner's cooling affections, and Kevin didn't bother to hide much, coming up with laughable excuses for his late return home. Lisa worked as an administrator in the pension fund. When she began to suspect that her husband was, as they say, straying, she contacted a university classmate who worked in the local police department and had access to various spy gadgets. Lisa asked him to lend her one of those devices. He hesitated and refused at first, but eventually agreed, sternly warning her not to tell anyone and to return it quickly, or he could lose his job and face charges. Well, if that's the case, then go alone, of course. It's a shame we haven't gone out together in so long, Lisa replied to Kevin. Let me at least iron your new shirt so you look presentable, and don't forget to shave. While her husband buzzed with the electric razor in the bathroom, Lisa quickly retrieved a surveillance kit from under her clothes in the wardrobe and inserted a tiny transmitter the size of a pin into the inner lining of her husband's jacket. As the workday ended, the entire staff of the firm, where Kevin was the department head, hurried to a restaurant for a corporate event. The employees, accompanied by their spouses, close friends and partners, entered the elegantly decorated hall. Kevin arrived with a glamorously dressed woman, who clung tightly to his side, swaying her hips as they walked. The venue buzzed with preparations for the important event. Musicians tuned their instruments on a small stage, while waiters hurried about with trays of various appetizers. Mr. Rodney had spared no expense, and the employees eagerly anticipated the delicacies. Kevin, Dakota playfully addressed her companion, aren't you worried about being here with me instead of your wife? What are you talking about? Kevin laughed loudly. No one will remember that, hen. Everyone will be admiring you, my gorgeous lady. Besides, I don't care what anyone thinks. My wife and I live like strangers. It's you I love. He pulled Dakota close and kissed her. Meanwhile, Lisa, knowing the start time of the corporate event, had activated a listening device in advance. Hearing her husband refer to her as a hen, she nearly burst into tears from the insult. What a scoundrel, Lisa thought, wiping away tears. Not only is he openly cheating without a shred of decency in front of his colleagues, but he's also speaking so disparagingly about me to his mistress. What a vain peacock, strutting around like that. No, I won't let this slide. I need to go there right now and cause a massive scandal. He won't forget this corporate event anytime soon. Lisa, despite her emotional turmoil, managed to freshen up her appearance, though it was challenging with anger and hurt welling inside her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her head ached from the shock of hearing her husband's cruel words. Without delay, she called a taxi and left the apartment, hiding the listening device in her jacket pocket. As she sat in the taxi, continuing to listen for any further insults from her husband, she didn't immediately notice who her driver was. It was only upon closer inspection that she saw the taxi's steering wheel was equipped with hand controls for the gas and brake, and a pair of crutches stood between the seats. Oh, Lisa thought in concern, I hope we don't get into an accident. Noticing her concerned gaze, the driver nodded and calmly said, I see you're worried about my crutches. No need to be. I've been driving this car for a long time, without any accidents. I have 2 children to feed, and life forced me to adapt. Though not entirely reassured, Lisa observed how skillfully and carefully the driver manoeuvred the car, momentarily distracting her from her own troubles. She cautiously asked about his story, curious about how he came to be a single parent to 2 children. Marcus, the driver, had a challenging life. He had been a taxi driver for many years, but was involved in an accident caused by another drunk driver a few years ago, who was entirely at fault, and by court order paid Marcus a substantial compensation for his injuries, as well as a small pension. Since Marcus suffered a severe spinal injury and now relied on crutches to move around. Before the accident, Marcus was married to a woman who was already pregnant at the time. She gave birth to twins. Marcus, however, took it calmly, considering the children his own, and happily cared for them with joy and pleasure. However, after the car accident, his wife, seeing what her husband had become, fell into deep despair. One day she decided to visit her mother, leaving the children with her husband for just a couple of days, as she assured him. Alas, it turned out to be a ruse, a convenient excuse to abandon both her husband and children. She proved to be a heartless cuckoo, not even calling once to ask how Marcus was doing or how the boys were faring. Marcus had to care for both himself and raise the children alone. It was undeniably difficult. At times, despair made him want to abandon everything and run away from home. But, overcoming his struggles, he learned to manage the household and take the children to kindergarten. With the compensation money, he bought a car and had it modified for hand controls at a service station. He began driving passengers, finding it convenient as he wasn't tied to a work schedule and could arrange with the dispatcher to take breaks and spend time with his children. Occasionally, his mother would visit him from the village to help her son. Each time she came, she couldn't help but lament her daughter-in-law's actions. How could she abandon her little ones? Doesn't she have a heart? Marcus would try to calm her, saying, Mum, let it go. It's all in the past. Why dwell on it? I told you, even when she was pregnant, she wasn't overjoyed. She didn't really want children. Once, in a moment of honesty, she told me she even considered a termination, but was afraid of the potential complications. But look at the boys. They're independent, close-knit, and already helping me out. Lisa was astonished by his story. You're a wonderful person. It's not easy raising someone else's children, especially in your condition. Few healthy people would take on such a responsibility. As they neared the restaurant where the corporate event was taking place, Lisa suddenly overheard a strange conversation between Kevin and someone named Sam. "Listen," Sam said, "we need to push our plan, starting tomorrow. The longer Mr. Rodney stays in his chair, the higher the chance everything will be exposed, and it'll be our heads on the chopping block, not his. Do you agree, Kevin?" "Yes, you're probably right," Kevin replied hesitantly. "We have some documents. If we prepare and present them correctly to the General Director, showing the operations our boss is running, I think it will be enough to oust him. What do you think? Does one of us have a chance to take the leadership role afterward? Just don't forget about me when everything works out. I won't forget about you. We'll move forward together." Lisa was shocked by these words. So, Kevin was not only cheating, but also involved in a serious plot at work. She couldn't believe that her husband, whom the boss had taken a risk on by appointing him as department head, despite his past incompetence, was involved in such scheming. What a scoundrel! Look what he's planning, and I'm just a hen, unwanted and unneeded. Just you wait. I'll get even with you for this audacity, she fumed. While she had initially planned to confront her husband at the corporate event, the conversation she overheard changed her mind. Lisa decided to take a different approach. What's the point of storming in and causing a scene now? I'll see his smug face, and then what? No, I need to think through everything I've heard and then act with a clear head. Just you wait, dear hubby. You shouldn't have tried to humiliate me. Getting a new plan in mind, Lisa asked the taxi driver to let her out before reaching the restaurant. Seeing that his passenger was troubled, the driver offered to take her home, but Lisa declined, deciding to walk home to cool down. She felt pain and humiliation. Her sense of dignity was shattered. Her heart pounded with anxiety, and tears of resentment choked her. As she went through the park, lost in thought, she noticed 3 young men approaching her. "Where are you rushing to, beautiful?" one of them slurred. Lisa tried to sidestep them, but one of the men struck out his foot, nearly tripping her. "Please, let me pass," she pleaded. "Wait, let's get to know each other," another drooled, his words slurred. Lisa felt a wave of fear. She tried to run, and at that moment, the 3rd man snatched her purse. Fortunately, she managed to break free and escape from the hooligans. Almost running, choking back tears, she hurried home, hating her husband and his antics. "He's having fun, feeling good, and why should I suffer? He left me at home, betrayed me, and now I've been robbed because of him. He's ruined my life instantly. I hate him." She arrived home in tears. To her surprise, her mother-in-law was already waiting for her here. Sarah had come to visit, but no one was home. Fortunately, she had keys to their apartment. The mother-in-law was taken aback and rushed to ask, "Lisa, what happened to you? Why are you crying? Where is Kevin? What's going on with you two?" Lisa wanted to pour her heart out to her mother-in-law about her son's treachery, but she quickly composed herself and decided not to. "I was just robbed, right in the park. I went to the pharmacy because I had a terrible headache and needed painkillers. 3 drunk men accosted me. They snatched my purse. Luckily, I managed to break free and run away. I got off with just a scare, but I was terrified." Sarah was alarmed. "Did you get a good look at those scoundrels? Why are we just standing here? Call the police. Let them catch the bandits while the trail is hot. You poor thing." But Lisa just waved her hand dismissively. "It's pointless. There were only keys to the apartment and a little money in the purse. My phone was in my jacket pocket, thank goodness. I'll make a duplicate of the keys tomorrow, and that's that. I'm sad about the purse, but oh well, the police won't bother with such trivialities. I'll just waste my time being dragged around." Gradually, Lisa calmed down largely thanks to her mother-in-law. Sarah had brought treats for her son and daughter-in-law. She had baked cheesecake muffins. Lisa put the kettle on, and over tea they chatted about this and that. Lisa and her mother-in-law shared a warm and trusting relationship. Sarah appreciated Lisa's housekeeping skills, cleanliness and diligence. Lisa kept the house spotless, especially the kitchen, and always prepared home-cooked meals for her husband. She had a good job, was well educated, and was comfortable with modern technology. Moreover, Lisa was intelligent, attractive, and pleasant to talk to, making her an ideal daughter-in-law in Sarah's eyes. After a heart-to-heart conversation, Sarah headed home, and exhausted from the day's events, Lisa collapsed onto her bed and fell asleep. She was awakened by the crash of a fallen teapot in the kitchen. It was 6 a.m, and her husband had just returned from the corporate event, heavily intoxicated. He stumbled around the kitchen, knocking things over, before drinking some water and retreating to bed. Suddenly realizing she couldn't live with her husband for another minute, Lisa decided that she also couldn't let the scheme he and Sam had planned against Mr. Rodney go unpunished. Although she didn't know Mr. Rodney personally, she believed he must be a decent man if scoundrels like her husband and his friend were plotting against him, intending to tarnish his reputation before the general director. Lisa obtained Mr. Rodney's phone number from the reception and called him. She introduced herself and requested a meeting, but not in the office. Mr. Rodney was surprised. Why would the wife of one of his employees want to meet him secretly? But he agreed to meet at a cafe near the office. Upon hearing what Lisa had to say, Mr. Rodney interrupted her in disbelief. "Nonsense! A conspiracy against me? You're saying Kevin and Sam are involved? I can't believe it. I treat them both fairly. They have good salaries. Why would they do this? Besides, the general director is my relative, unbeknownst to them. Who do you think he'll trust, them or me?" But after he had listened to the recording of the conversation from the corporate event, he admitted, "Indeed, you were right. What scoundrels! I didn't expect them to plot something like this. Thank you. Now I'm forewarned and forearmed. I'll take the strictest measures. Neither will get away with this. Besides, let me return the favour. Don't waste your time. Kevin is quite the womanizer. He's been seeing a woman named Dakota. He was with her at the corporate event. My advice to you, leave him. He doesn't value or love you." Lisa sighed and replied, "I know about his mistress. That's why I came here. It's a farewell message to my husband. You're right. I'll do just that. Thank you for the advice. Goodbye." Meanwhile, her husband sorting through the pile of his clothes after the corporate event, he suddenly felt something unusual on the lapel. Seeing what it was, he froze. "Oh, someone from work must have decided to overhear my conversations. Are they aware of my plans?" As for Mr. Rodney, he was indeed related to the general director, but used every opportunity to outmaneuver him for personal gain. And Kevin and Sam had caught wind of his actual misdeeds. Knowing about the brewing conspiracy, Mr. Rodney decided to toy with them like a seasoned cat with a mouse. He summoned Kevin to his office and subtly hinted that he had just spoken with Sam, who allegedly warned him that Kevin was plotting to frame Mr. Rodney to take his position. Kevin left the office in a panic, cursing his friend. "You can't trust anyone. There's betrayal everywhere. I need to stop talking to Sam and forget this whole scheme." Sam's thoughts, whom he invited right after Kevin, were flowing in almost the same direction. Now both men pretended nothing had happened and that they were still friends, carefully avoiding any discussion about overthrowing their boss. And Mr. Rodney, observing from a distance, rubbed his hands in satisfaction. He had skillfully neutralised these fools, essentially pitting them against each other. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother-in-law faced problems with her health. During a checkup, the doctor insisted that Sarah undergo a thorough examination by a specialist. "Lisa," Sarah called her daughter-in-law after the appointment, "I need your help. I'm going to the clinic for an examination. Can you come with me tomorrow?" Lisa, getting worried, took a day off work and accompanied her mother-in-law to the doctor's office early the next morning. While Sarah was being examined, Lisa stepped outside and saw a familiar taxi driver supporting himself with crutches, leading a little boy to the paediatrician. "Oh, hi, do you remember me? How are you?" "Hi, of course. I'm all right. We're here to see the doctor. My son was ill, but he is all right now, and tomorrow he'll be back in school. Right, Thomas?" Marcus said. Just then, Sarah emerged from the doctor's office, visibly upset. Lisa hurriedly said goodbye to Marcus and rushed to her mother-in-law. "What did the doctor say?" she asked. Sarah, unable to hold back her tears, replied sadly, "He said I need surgery and urgently. Oh, I dread going under the knife." Lisa did her best to reassure her. "Don't worry. At least now we know what needs to be done. I'll speak to the doctor myself. You sit here, have some water, and try to calm down. Everything will be all right. We'll get through this together." Sarah took Lisa's hand and thanked her sincerely. "Thank you, Lisa. You are like a daughter to me. The way you care and worry. I called Kevin, but he's always busy, never has a moment for his mother. It's hurtful." After speaking with the surgeon, Lisa learned that the operation would be performed free of charge under her medical insurance. The procedure was routine, typically without complications, and patients usually recovered well. She escorted her mother-in-law home, instructing her to gather her belongings for the hospital stay. Then Lisa called Kevin to inform him about his mother's surgery. He took a long time to answer, and when he finally did, he snapped irritably. "What's the emergency? A flood or a war? First my mother calls, now you. Can't you see I'm at work?" Lisa couldn't hold back any longer. "What kind of person are you? You don't care about anyone. Not me, not your own mother. She's having surgery tomorrow. Did you even know? Or are you only interested in your mistress, Dakota, and not your wife or mother? You called me a hen at the corporate event, remember?" Kevin exploded. "So you're the one who set me up at work. I wondered why the boss was so angry with me. You bugged my phone. How could you snitch on your own husband?" Lisa retorted, "What choice did I have? You're hardly ever home, always lying, and I'm supposed to put up with it? I can't stand you anymore. You're a disgusting cheater. I'm filing for divorce. I won't live with a scoundrel like you anymore." Lisa hung up, her mood ruined. She sat down and cried, then, calming down slightly, asked herself, "Where will I live now?" It wasn't a simple question. She couldn't stay in her husband's apartment, and her mother-in-law's tiny one-bedroom wasn't an option either. She considered staying with her mother in the suburb, though she knew she wouldn't last long there. Lisa's father had passed away long ago, and her mother had remarried. Her stepfather, though he earned some money working for a local plant, was a heavy drinker and became violent when intoxicated. Lisa never understood why her mother stayed with him. When Lisa was in her final year of school, he started making lewd advances, even trying to touch her inappropriately when her mother wasn't home. Lisa, always able to stand up for herself, threatened him with a frying pan and warned she'd report him to the police. She vowed never to see him again and hadn't returned home since, though she kept in touch with her mother and sent her money. Now, facing her own difficulties, Lisa decided to visit her mother, hoping to find some solace and time to think about her future. Lisa's mother was overjoyed to see her daughter, crying and embracing her, fussing over setting the table. Lisa, not yet unpacking her bag, shared her sad news with her mother, who shook her head in sympathy, trying to dissuade her from the divorce. "Lisa, don't talk nonsense. Kevin may not be perfect. He's strayed and been rude and you're hurt. But that's our lot as women, to endure and forgive. Men are all like that. It's not easy with them. You need to adapt, accept it. Maybe you'll reconcile. After all, family is important." Lisa was astonished by her mother's words and even snapped, "Why should I endure? You've put up with that brute all your life, hiding from him at the neighbours'. Are you happy, Mum? By the way, where is he? It's unusually quiet in the house. Or have you finally kicked out Ed?" Just then, they heard cursing outside. The drunken stepfather had tripped over something in the yard and fallen. "Now he'll start looking for someone to blame," the mother whispered in despair, wringing her hands. Indeed, stumbling into the room and seeing not just his wife, but also his stepdaughter, the stepfather began cursing both of them without restraint. "Well, well, look who's here. Couldn't hack city life so you remembered your mama. I'm the boss here. What I say goes. You women need to be kept in line." Lisa was shocked and tried to reason with the raging drunk. "This is Mum's house, not yours. What a boss you are. I see nothing's changed here." Turning to her mother, she asked, "Mum, do you like all this? How can you put up with this drunken monster?" But seeing her mother silent and submissive, Lisa was even more dismayed. Worse, her mother began fussing over her stepfather, even scolding Lisa. "Lisa, how could you? Ed, are you hurt? Do you want some water?" Disgusted, Lisa grabbed her bag and headed for the bus stop. She wasn't welcome here, and her mother, completely dependent on her stepfather, didn't say a word in Lisa's defense. There was no changing her. Let her live as she wished. Fortunately, Lisa had a friend in the city who was still single. Staying with her for a few days, Lisa took some time off work and prepared her mother-in-law for surgery. Sarah was distressed about the operation and asked Lisa to call a notary. "Why do you need a notary now, Sarah? Wait until you're better. Then you can go yourself if you must." Lisa tried to persuade her. "No, Lisa, do as I ask. I have a bad feeling," Sarah begged. After the notary's visit, Sarah said to Lisa, "I've left the apartment to you." "But what about your son?" Lisa asked in surprise. "My son?" Sarah paused, then said sadly, "He has his own place. He won't be homeless. You see how it is. He's forgotten me, doesn't need his mother any more. But you're like a daughter to me. I'm so grateful to you. You're the closest person to me now." And, covering her eyes with her hand, the woman quietly wept. Lisa, upon learning that she had inherited her mother-in-law's apartment, initially intended to inform her about the impending divorce with her husband. However, she decided to wait. She understood that such news would devastate her mother-in-law, who was already suffering from depression. Finally, the day of the operation arrived, and everything went smoothly. By evening, Lisa was already talking to Sarah. "See? Everything turned out successfully," Lisa chirped joyfully. "I spoke with the doctor and he assured me that you'll be able to walk soon. Now just eat well to recover faster. I'll bring you fresh food every day." Sarah melted at these words, feeling genuinely better. As for her son, he hadn't visited or even called her once. It seemed her son had forgotten all of that, now preoccupied only with himself, with no concern for his mother. Meanwhile, Lisa, delighted that the operation had been successful, walked down the street from the hospital, pondering where she would live next. She felt uncomfortable burdening her friend any longer, even though her friend pretended everything was fine. But where could she go? Renting an apartment was expensive, and her modest salary wouldn't cover it. Just at that moment she ran into Marcus, the taxi driver, who was standing pensively on crutches next to his car, sighing heavily. It was clear that serious problems weighed on him. After greeting him, Lisa asked sympathetically, "You look so lost. Is everything all right? Are the boys sick again?" "No, my boys are fine, but I've run into a problem myself," Marcus confided. He explained that he had been offered a good job delivering small trade orders around the city, but the hours were long, from 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening. He had heard about an experienced masseur in town who used a unique method which had helped many people, like Marcus, regain mobility. However, his services were expensive. "So I would like to take this job, but there's no one to pick the boys up from school and look after them in the evening," Marcus concluded. "And I can't afford a nanny. I'm standing here wondering what to do." Lisa shared her own situation, revealing that she was getting a divorce and was now homeless. After a moment of silence, Marcus, slightly embarrassed, proposed, "Lisa, would you consider it too forward if I suggested we combine our efforts to solve both our problems at once?" Lisa was intrigued by the offer and asked, "And how exactly would this work?" "Well, you'll live with me for free. My apartment is a 4-bedroom, so you'll have one room to yourself. In exchange, I'd like you to help take care of the children, take them to and from school. If you could also cook for them, that would be fantastic. I'll provide money for groceries. What do you think?" He looked at her hopefully. Lisa, initially taken back by the proposal, pondered it. Renting an apartment was necessary anyway, and this seemed like a ready-made, cost-free solution. She wasn't afraid of interacting with children. "All right," she replied after a moment. "Let's give it a try. It might just work out." The first few days in the new living arrangement were chaotic. Living with 4 people, including 2 7-year-olds, was quite different from just 2 adults. However, since everyone was willing to build relationships rather than quarrel, things soon settled into a normal rhythm. The children were obedient and not fussy. Lisa took a leave from work, extending it by a week at her own expense, and enthusiastically took charge of the household. Despite his best efforts, Marcus couldn't manage everything, especially with crutches, the way a true homemaker could. Soon everything was in order. All the laundry was washed, ironed, and neatly put away. The food was delicious, the children were happy, and Marcus was in bliss, coming home late from work to a warm meal. Lisa kept visiting her mother-in-law in hospital, bringing food, clothes, and anything else she needed. "See, I told you everything would be fine," Lisa reassured her. "Much depends on your mindset. You're doing great." Lisa instilled confidence in Sarah about her recovery. It pained Sarah to realize that her son was almost indifferent and cold towards her, never showing interest in her health. Even after learning from Lisa that she was in the hospital, he never visited, only calling a couple of times. She couldn't justify such indifference, and even the doctor was surprised by his absence. Time and again, Sarah bitterly recalled how hard it was to raise him alone. Her husband had died in a workplace accident, falling from a lift during equipment installation on the roof of an oil extraction plant. He died instantly, leaving a wound in Sarah's heart that never healed. He had been a good husband and father. Kevin was only 4 at the time. She never remarried, struggling to raise her son on a nursery school teacher's salary. Despite all the challenges, Sarah always strove to ensure that Kevin was well fed and dressed, no worse than others. Her son completed school with good grades and enrolled in college. Once again, his mother made many sacrifices, taking out a loan so that her son could complete his education. In short, Kevin was the light of her life, her joy and her hope. She was overjoyed when she unexpectedly learned that she had inherited a 2-room apartment from a distant, childless relative. When her son got married, he had a place to bring his wife. Sarah blessed the young couple and was happy that everything was going well for him in his family life and at work. Meanwhile, Kevin's love life also took a turn for the worse. As soon as Dakota sensed that Kevin's position was shaky, she quickly shifted her affections to Mr. Rodney. She began visiting him more frequently, always dressed provocatively. Eventually, the boss succumbed to her charms. Dakota revelled in her newfound importance, and it was she who revealed to Mr. Rodney the details of Kevin's plans against him. This, combined with what Mr. Rodney had heard from Lisa, led to Kevin's dismissal. Finding himself jobless and heartbroken, Kevin pondered his future and decided to take Lisa back. But Lisa met him coldly and sarcastically remarked, "So, Kevin had enough fun, left without a family and a job, and now you're crawling back to me like a whipped dog?" "Yes, Lisa, I was foolish, and I deeply regret it. I regret not cherishing our happiness and destroying our family with my own hands. But I hope that you will understand and forgive me. I truly loved only you, and I will never love anyone as much. If you refuse me, I won't be able to live." These hollow threats filled Lisa with only disgust. "No, Kevin, you've gone too far. You've caused me so much pain and nearly ruined my health. There's no point in rehashing the past, so I'm sorry, but I can't help you. You'll have to figure things out on your own. I have to get back to work," Lisa said and left. Kevin walked away, dejected and empty-handed. That same evening, Lisa told Sarah the news about the divorce, trying to do it as gently as possible. "Sarah, I will never abandon you. You are like a mother to me. If you ever need help with anything, you can always count on me. I hope you understand that I couldn't continue living with your son after everything he did." But Sarah had suspected much of this already. Lisa's revelations saddened her, but she held back her tears. Lisa approached her, embraced her and said, "Thank you, Sarah, for your understanding and kindness. Whenever you want to visit us, please do. You are always welcome." A few hours later, Lisa called Marcus to pick her up on his way back from the massage therapist. In the car, Marcus excitedly shared his progress in treating his back. The massage therapist promises that in just 3 months I'll be able to walk without crutches. Imagine, Lisa, once I'm free from pain, I'll be able to walk on my own 2 feet and be a normal person again. I'll even be able to get married. Lisa looked at him questioningly, but her heart raced with anticipation. Marcus looked at her tenderly and continued, "Don't be surprised, Lisa, by what I'm about to say. I want to propose to you. I've admired you from the first day I saw you, and every meeting since has only strengthened my feelings. I was overjoyed when I heard you had divorced your husband. A glimmer of hope shone through, but I thought, who would want a cripple like me? Now there's a chance I'll recover. I know I'm not the most desirable groom, a disabled man with 2 children, but I love you. I think about you all the time. Imagine holding you, kissing you. I can hardly believe I'm saying this to you now." Lisa, nearly in tears, shook Marcus's hand and replied, "You are not a man with disabilities, and don't ever say that. You are the best man in the world. Believe me, I have something to compare it to. I was married to a strong, healthy, handsome man, and what did I get? In all the years of our marriage, I never saw a fraction of the warmth and care from Kevin that I see from you. Only with you have I understood that a man's true worth lies in his actions, not his sweet talk and lies. You are a wonderful father, adopting and raising 2 children, and I'm sure you will be an amazing husband. The children are not a burden to me. They are 2 little sons that brighten our world. I agree to be your wife, and I believe everything will work out for us." Marcus tentatively kissed Lisa, and she responded with a kiss of her own. At that moment they both felt as if they had melted into each other, their hearts filled with joy and contentment. Lisa was not afraid of difficulties. She was prepared for them, for with Marcus by her side nothing seemed daunting. Kevin, essentially cast out of life due to his own foolish actions, spent his days at home, beginning each morning with a drink and ending each day in a drunken stupor. One morning, his hands trembling from a hangover, he was brushing his teeth when he caught sight of himself in the mirror. Staring back at him was a man with a week's worth of stubble, dishevelled hair and bloodshot eyes, a man he barely recognized.
Who was to blame for my predicament? My wife, Dakota, Sam, Mr. Rodney? I think the root of all my troubles is that cursed boss. He threw me out. He took everything from me.
Kevin's mind, clouded by days of drinking, couldn't discern the cause from the effect of his downfall. He had forgotten his romance with Dakota, his betrayal of his wife, and his plot with Sam to oust their boss. And only the thought persisted. Mr. Rodney was to blame. Late evening, Kevin bought a bottle of lighter fluid from a hardware store and headed to the office. Surrounded by darkness, with only the moon occasionally peeking through thick, low clouds, he doused the office door with the fluid, spilling some on his jacket. As he struggled to light the door with a trembling hand, the wind kept blowing out the flame. To keep the fire from going out again, Kevin shielded the lighter with his jacket and struck it once more. Finally, the flames caught, but so did his jacket. Kevin stumbled back, frantically trying to extinguish the fire on his clothes, his hands burning in agony. He barely managed to pull off his jacket, scorching his face in the process. Meanwhile, a fire truck, alerted by the fire alarm, was already racing to the scene, sirens wailing. The authorities quickly identified Kevin from the surveillance footage. In court, he sat with a red, barely healed face and hands still bandaged with severe burns. The damages were estimated to be roughly the value of Kevin's apartment, which he subsequently lost. After the incident, Sarah fell ill from the stress and never recovered from a stroke, passing away 6 months later. Lisa wept sincerely at the funeral, organising the farewell and wake with her husband. Kevin, drunk, also showed up, alternating between tears of remorse and shouting about inheriting his mother's apartment. Lisa watched with disgust and pity as the man who was once her husband made a spectacle of himself. When the notary read Sarah's will, Kevin flew into a rage. "You piece of work! You outmaneuvered me even in this! Always fawning over my mum, turning her against me, and now you've gotten her apartment!" He screamed at Lisa. But Lisa calmly replied, "You fool, Kevin. Your mother left me the apartment long ago, before her surgery, before I never used it. I only wished her health and happiness. It was you who drove her to her grave with your antics. Before you hate others, look at yourself. Stop drinking, go to church, and ask for forgiveness. I'll give it to you if you become a good man. I think Sarah would be glad if you managed." Lisa's words struck Kevin like a slap, sobering him instantly. He resolved to change, to make his mother proud of him, at least in the afterlife. He found a job as a security guard and, true to her word, Lisa gave him the keys to the apartment. Kevin no longer wandered the streets, and conversations with a priest helped him stay on track. He even remarried. Though he and Lisa never became friends, Kevin was grateful to her for setting him straight and giving him a second chance. Meanwhile, Marcus, after a course of massages and special exercises, was back on his feet, walking with a slight limp. He and Lisa got married and raised their children together, living happily. They decided to move out of the city, selling their apartment and buying a spacious house in the countryside. One day, Lisa's mother called, crying softly.
"You're right, dear. I can't live like this any more. I'm tired of Ed's drinking and cruelty, of the loneliness. I miss you so much. I don't want to live here any more. What should I do?"
Lisa replied without hesitation. "What do you mean, what should you do? Marcus and I will be there in an hour. Pack your things. You're coming to live with us. We bought a house. There's plenty of room." Lisa brought her mother to live with them. With the assistance of a police, they evicted Lisa's stepfather from her mother's house and helped her mother divorce him. For the first time in many years, the woman was happy. She no longer flinched in fear, surrounded by love and care. She delighted in looking after the boys and tending the garden, which was now immaculate. One evening, as mother and daughter sat on the veranda sipping tea, Lisa confided, "Mama, I don't know how to tell Marcus, but I think I'm pregnant. With 2 children already, how will he react? Can we manage?" The woman hugged her daughter and reassured her. "Silly girl, if Marcus could accept and raise 2 children from your first marriage, do you think he'll reject his own child? He'll be overjoyed. Don't worry. We'll raise this baby together." When Marcus heard the news, he was ecstatic, kissing Lisa and whispering his love and devotion. He thanked fate for bringing this wonderful woman into his life, who had become the meaning of his life, his inspiration. For her, he was ready to move mountains. Carolyn had noticed the little girl wandering nearby the restaurant for some time. The child would often peer through the large windows, captivated by the Christmas tree in the centre of the dining hall. The tree was adorned with bright lights and unique ornaments, but the most fascinating element was the train. A red locomotive ran along a carefully laid track, circling the tree from bottom to top all day long. It truly was a magical sight. The girl from the street was drawn to the moving train, frequently returning to the window to admire it. Carolyn understood the girl's fascination. Even she and her colleagues had been mesmerized by the spectacle at first. The girl was clearly from a troubled background. In the cold December weather, she wore only a cheap, ill-fitting jacket and boys' sneakers, with no scarf to protect her from the chill. Her thin neck was exposed, and her eyes held a deep sadness and hunger. Carolyn herself had moved to the city from a village. She studied to be a confectioner and worked part-time as a waitress at the restaurant. In her village there were many struggling families, but the community looked out for one another, providing food and warm clothing for the children in need. This little girl, who appeared to be no more than 9 or 10, had been wandering alone for hours, cold and hungry. Carolyn's heart ached for her, reminded of her own younger sister back home. The thought of her sister facing such hardships was unbearable. Carolyn felt a deep compassion for the girl and wished she could help in some way. Carolyn entered the decorated hall once again to deliver an order to the guests. Through the window she saw the little girl still standing there. What was she doing out in the cold? The child gazed at the Christmas tree and the toy train running through its fluffy branches, perhaps dreaming of something. Carolyn finished serving the table and was about to return to the kitchen when she met the gaze of the little vagabond girl. The child's eyes held a desperation and hopelessness far beyond her years. Carolyn couldn't bear it any longer. She marched resolutely toward the exit, not the main one, but the staff entrance. She grabbed someone's coat, not bothering to find her own. A moment later she stood before the girl. The child looked at her with surprise and hope. "Hello," Carolyn smiled. "You must be freezing." The girl nodded slowly. "Come inside and warm up. Your nose is almost blue." The girl rubbed her slightly upturned nose, as if suddenly remembering it existed. "You need to warm up and have some tea. I have cookies in the kitchen." "Cookies?" The girl's eyes lit up with joy. Carolyn knew the manager wouldn't approve of a poor child in their kitchen. Andre was a strict boss, but he had left for a year-end meeting at the head office, which would likely last for hours. By the time Andre returned, the girl would be gone, warm and fed. It was a small act of kindness, and the girl would still face cold and hungry days ahead, but at least for today she would be a little happier than usual. And so they found themselves in the kitchen. The waitstaff on duty understood Carolyn's desire to care for the homeless girl. Chiara, the cook, took the little guest under her wing, immediately placing a steaming bowl of soup and a basket of rolls before her. The girl pounced on the food like a hungry wolf cub. Only Chef Paul looked at the child with a hint of disdain. "Why did you bring her here? This violates all hygiene standards. You'll bring in lice or fleas." Carolyn knew Paul would grumble, but wouldn't go further. He wouldn't chase the girl away or tell Andre about her. Paul was kind. He just liked to put on a tough act. In fact, he even fried an egg in the shape of a heart, especially for the little girl, and garnished it with vegetables. "What's your name, dear?" Chiara asked, sitting next to the girl, who had begun to eat more slowly, savouring each bite now that her initial hunger was satisfied. "Terrell," the girl replied. "Terrell?" Carolyn echoed in surprise. "That's a beautiful name." "Yes, everyone says so," little Terrell replied with a pleased smile. Bonita, Terrell's mother, didn't know where the name had come from when it popped into her head. Perhaps she had heard it on a TV show or read it in a romance novel long ago. Bonita had once loved such stories, dreaming of a life like those of the heroines, beautiful and cared for by a loving man. But her life hadn't turned out that way. At 16, Bonita ran away from home without much thought or regret. There wasn't much of a home to leave behind. She had grown up in a village, in a dilapidated shack, under the care of an elderly great-grandmother. But her great-grandmother didn't pay much attention to raising the girl. There was never a hint of warmth or closeness between them. So, when a long-haul trucker invited the young Bonita to join him, she agreed without hesitation. Nothing held her back in her home village, and she dreamed of a better life. The man seemed deeply in love with her, and they lived together for 4 years in his small apartment. Though they never officially married, they had 2 children, born a year apart. However, Bonita's boyfriend eventually found a new love, leaving Bonita with no home, no income, and with 2 young children to care for. However, Bonita met another man, older than her ex. She had more children with him, but when he passed away, his relatives evicted her and her children from his place. Once again, Bonita was alone, now with 4 children to feed, clothe and care for. Life became an endless struggle. Bonita moved from one friend's place to another, sometimes staying with various men. She tried to work, but her lack of skills limited her to cleaning jobs. Also, frequent pregnancies, young children, and her growing dependence on alcohol made holding down a job nearly impossible. Drinking was the only way she could cope with the harsh reality of her life. It was into this chaotic world that Terrell was born. By then, her mother had managed to secure a place to live. During a period of sobriety, she reached out to social services, local administration, and even journalists, sharing her story and seeking help for herself and her children. Bonita was shown compassion and support, and she was even given a 3-room apartment. Though it was in a rough neighbourhood and in poor condition, the woman was overjoyed to finally have a place of her own. At first, Bonita even tried to turn her life to the best. She found work as a janitor in the housing cooperative and planned to renovate the apartment, replace the windows and redo the wallpaper. However, these tasks proved too daunting for her. She was accustomed to coping with life differently, often turning to alcohol, and soon slipped back into her old habits. 5 children, yes, 5, now crammed into the small apartment. They lived impoverished, wearing hand-me-downs from neighbours or clothes given by the social services centre. Terrell, one of the children, knew no other life. She understood that a different existence was possible, seeing her classmates and other children in the neighbourhood, but she had never experienced it herself. She was used to the older siblings looking after the younger ones, and knew that a good meal was a rare treat. Whenever the opportunity arose, she would eat as much as she could. She also understood the importance of maintaining the appearance of well-being in front of others, pretending to be like the other children. Otherwise, they might be sent to an orphanage, which her mother often threatened would be a terrible place where children were beaten and humiliated. Terrell valued her family despite their poverty. She loved her mother and siblings and feared being sent away. Though they lived in poverty, no one was ever beaten or mistreated. Her mother's friends often came in the evenings, locking themselves in the kitchen to drink and talk late into the night. Terrell disliked these gatherings. Her mother would sleep all day afterward, sometimes snoring loudly, other times lying so still that Terrell would check to see if she was breathing. It was frightening. Her mother was kind to all her children, often hugging the little ones and telling them she would do anything for them. But these were just words. She rarely followed through with actions. Despite the challenges, Terrell was deeply attached to her mother. She considered her the kindest and most beautiful woman, hoping that one day her mother would find a good job and stop drinking. Every New Year's Eve, Terrell would make the same wish as the clock struck midnight. Besides, New Year's Day was always magical for Terrell. Her mother would always prepare something special, like roasted chicken or goulash. This festive meal was perhaps the only tradition in their family, but it was cherished. The anticipation of New Year's would begin for Terrell with the first snowfall. As soon as snowflakes started to dance in the air, her heart would flutter with excitement. Though her mother couldn't afford gifts, the delicious home-cooked dinner, the intimate family gathering, heartfelt conversations, and the ritual of making a wish as the clock struck midnight, all of this was pure magic for Terrell. At school, Terrell struggled with her studies. She envied classmates who seemed to grasp concepts effortlessly. Despite her best efforts, some subjects remained incomprehensible to her. Her teacher, however, was kind and patient, often explaining difficult topics to Terrell and occasionally giving her small gifts, usually school supplies. The teacher saw the financial struggles of Terrell's mother and did what she could to help. That day the girl walked home from school, upbeat. The school year was almost over, and holidays were just around the corner. She loved school, the clean, warm, bright building, the delicious meals in the cafeteria, and her kind teacher. However, getting up in the morning was tough, especially if her mother had been out late the night before. Terrell looked forward to catching up on sleep during the break. She decided to take a stroll through the festive city centre instead of going straight home. Home was cold, with old window frames that let in the chill. Her mother wanted to install new plastic ones, but money was tight. There was never enough food at home, and the place was a mess from the previous night's gathering. Her mother was likely still asleep, recovering from the late-night festivities with friends. Terrell hoped those friends had left. The city centre was beautifully decorated with lights and festive storefronts. One window in particular caught her eye, a restaurant with a stunning Christmas tree inside. What truly captivated her was the tiny red train that ran along the tree's branches. She found herself returning to the window again and again, drawn like a magnet to the enchanting sight. As she prepared to take one last look before heading home in the cold, a young woman emerged from the restaurant. She was remarkably beautiful, with tall, slender features and blue eyes like an actress. She smiled at Terrell and invited her inside, It felt like a Christmas miracle, though Terrell no longer believed in magic. This moment made her wonder if she had been wrong. Inside the restaurant was like a scene from a movie, filled with warmth and wonder. Elegant tables, well-dressed people, though Terrell saw it all from a distance and only briefly, as the young woman led her into the kitchen, where tantalizing aromas filled the air. Terrell felt a bit embarrassed. What if these people, the chefs, the waiters, chased her away, a poor girl from the streets? She was used to being shooed away, but the woman with kind eyes placed a bowl of soup in front of Terrell. A man who didn't look very friendly fried her an egg shaped like a heart, something Terrell had never seen before. Someone slipped her a candy, and another person gently ruffled her hair. Terrell savoured every bite, relishing the delicious food. She had been hungry for so long, and now this feast. The people around her looked at her with kindness and pity. "Do you have a home?" Carolyn, the blue-eyed young woman who had brought Terrell into the restaurant, asked. "Yes," Terrell nodded, "but I don't want to go there." Why? Terrell didn't hide anything from these kind people. She told them everything, about her loving but alcoholic mother, their poverty, her siblings, and how cold their apartment was. But in the summer it was cosy. She talked about school and how the 6th grade boys teased her, calling her a tramp, though her classmates never did. Carolyn listened intently, seeming to understand Terrell better than anyone else. That's why Terrell felt comfortable sharing her story so openly. She didn't quite understand why, but it made her feel lighter. "Oh, you poor thing," Kiara said sympathetically. She too had been listening to Terrell's story. "Terrell, listen," Carolyn said. "Come see us after school, whenever you can, even every day. If the manager isn't around, we'll feed you here in the kitchen, and if he is, we'll give you something to take with you. We always have plenty of leftovers. What do you think?" "What do I think? I think it's wonderful." Terrell gazed in awe at the people around her, so kind and warm. She felt their support, and it was simply wonderful. "I really, really want this," the girl finally exclaimed. "I can't even believe it." Kiara hugged her tightly, and soon Carolyn joined them, followed by others. Even the stern chef was smiling at the sight. "Well, that's settled then," Carolyn said. "While the manager is away, you can explore the place, but don't approach the guests. They might not like it." "Oh, thank you," Terrell replied. "I'm so curious to see what a restaurant looks like inside, and to get a closer look at the train." "The train is indeed a marvel," Carolyn smiled. "Go ahead and explore." Terrell set off to investigate the restaurant. It had several rooms, each uniquely decorated. One resembled a palace chamber, with velvet-backed chairs and ornate paintings. Another was like a futuristic cafe, with chrome surfaces and minimalistic design. The third room amazed Terrell with its fake windows, screens displaying a luxurious beach scene, complete with waves and palm trees. It looked so real, as if stepping outside would lead to a sunny summer day, despite it being December. Finally, Terrell found herself in the largest room, where a Christmas tree stood, its branches adorned with a miniature red express train. This was the most beautiful room of all. She slowly circled the tree, admiring the unique ornaments, dolls in elegant dresses, colourful balls, icicles, tiny Santa Clauses, and snowflakes. There was so much to see. Terrell also marvelled at the guests. They seemed from another world, elegant, cheerful, almost unreal. She was particularly drawn to a couple sitting by the window. The woman was incredibly beautiful, like a model from the internet. She had large blue eyes, defined cheekbones, and full lips. Everything she did was graceful and natural, not at all forced. She looked at the man sitting across from her with warmth and love, seemingly asking him for something. Terrell couldn't make out the words from where she stood, but she could see the genuine affection between them. The man was equally striking, with a particularly charming smile that he flashed often. Even though Terrell was young, she could tell that these two truly loved each other. She wished that one day she too could sit in a restaurant with someone who looked at her with such warmth. But she knew that such a life was likely far from her reach. Suddenly the man received a phone call. He answered, furrowing his brow as he struggled to hear over the music playing in the dining hall. He smiled at the woman, said a few words, and stepped out into the vestibule to continue his conversation in quiet. Left alone at the table, the woman's expression changed. Her eyes darted around nervously, and the contentment and joy vanished from her face. Terrell sensed that something was off. The woman seemed poised to do something deceitful. Terrell had always been perceptive, able to read people's intentions through their expressions and gestures, a skill that had often protected her. Terrell watched intently as the woman did something strange. With a quick motion, she pulled a small packet from her purse, emptied its contents into the man's plate, and hid the packet away. She did it all in a matter of seconds, making sure no one was watching. She likely didn't notice Terrell. The girl's heart raced as she realized what she had just witnessed. Terrell quickly understood the gravity of the situation. She had witnessed something terrible. If the man returned and ate the soup, which likely contained a dissolved powder, he would face serious trouble, possibly even death. The woman must have intended to poison him. Terrell had seen such plots in movies. Why else would someone secretly add powder to food? She couldn't believe how deceptive appearances could be. Initially, the woman seemed like a kind fairy, but now she looked like a beautiful yet evil witch. Terrell knew she had to act immediately. The responsibility weighing on her young shoulders was immense. She considered telling Carolyn, but finding and explaining everything to her would take too long. The man could return and eat the poisoned soup any moment. No, she had to act swiftly and directly. Terrell nodded to herself, determined, and hurried toward the door leading to the lobby. She spotted the man immediately. He was sitting on a leather couch, engrossed in a phone conversation, gesturing animatedly. It seemed like an important call. Terrell hid behind a column, waiting. Carolyn had asked her not to approach or speak to the guests, as it might upset them. But this was an exceptional case. However, she felt anxious. How could she just approach such an important person? He was handsome, wealthy, and grown up. What if he didn't believe her? What if he got angry and chased her away? What if she had misunderstood the situation? Doubts flooded her mind, and her palms grew sweaty with nerves. Yet, when the man ended his call, Terrell stepped forward. "Hello," she murmured. "Hello there," the man replied kindly, looking at her with warmth. "I need to tell you, please don't eat your soup. Ask for a different one, or just say you don't want it." "And why is that?" The man looked at Terrell with curiosity and surprise. "Because," Terrell hesitated. It was harder than she thought to reveal such a truth. "Because I saw the woman you're with put something in your soup when you left. I think it's poison." "Poison?" The man still smiled, but his eyes gradually turned cold and frightening. He probably thought she was making up a story, this impudent girl who dared to speak to him and utter such nonsense. "Well, I'm not sure if it's poison, but she added something. Maybe it's just some spices." Terrell herself was beginning to doubt what she had seen. "But think why she did it after you left, and so quickly, as if she didn't want anyone to see." "You saw this yourself? And this isn't some game? You're telling the truth?" "Yes." Terrell could see that the man believed her, and that her words were causing him pain. But she had to tell him. If something happened to him, she would feel terrible. She liked this man, his open, kind gaze and gentle voice. He seemed like a good person, undeserving of being poisoned. No one deserved that. "I could be wrong, of course," Terrell added, "but you shouldn't eat that soup." "All right," the man smiled. "Thank you for being so observant." He reached into his pockets and pulled out several bills. "Here, buy yourself something. A little gift from me for the new year." "Thank you," Terrell said, delighted. With this money she could buy so much. Her heart fluttered with joy at the thought of the shopping spree ahead. The worries that had weighed on her just moments ago faded away, replaced by a sense that everything would be all right. The man returned to the dining hall. Terrell, after waiting a moment, followed him. She was curious to see how he would act now. Hiding behind the Christmas tree, she watched the couple at the window table. The man sat down as if nothing had happened, and the conversation between the pair resumed. The woman looked as charming and in love as before, but Terrell was no longer fooled by the serene scene. She had formed her own opinion of this beauty. The man seemed in no hurry to try his soup. He asked his companion questions, while she appeared nervous and anxious. Several times she urged him to start eating, but he delayed. Terrell watched curiously, wondering what he would do. Would he simply avoid the food, or did he have another plan? Just then, musicians took the stage, filling the room with live music. Terrell's attention was momentarily drawn to the performers in their elegant attire, with their intriguing instruments and equipment. When she looked back at the couple, she was shocked to see the man calmly eating the soup, the very soup that had been tampered with. The woman, seemingly at ease now, also began to eat. Terrell couldn't believe it. She had tried to warn him, but it seemed he hadn't believed her. She considered rushing from her hiding spot to knock the plate to the floor before he ate too much. But what would that accomplish? She might be banned from the restaurant, losing her new friends and the delicious food, yet saving a life was more important. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. The woman began to cough violently, clutching at the tablecloth and pulling it toward her, sending dishes crashing to the floor. The commotion drew everyone's attention. The man quickly pulled out his phone, presumably to call for help. Staff and patrons rushed to the table, blocking Terrell's view. She couldn't see what was happening anymore, but the urgency in the air was palpable. Carolyn approached Terrell, appearing seemingly out of nowhere. "Are you scared, little one?" she asked, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Yes, a little. What's happening?" The woman suddenly felt ill. "We're not sure why. An ambulance has been called, and the manager has been notified. Soon, doctors, the police, and our strict boss will be here. You should head home now, but make sure to come back tomorrow after school. I'll be waiting for you, and so will others." "Okay, I will." Terrell smiled at Carolyn. She quickly got dressed and hurried home. Terrell couldn't make sense of it all. The woman had put powder in the man's soup, and he had tasted it. But it was the woman who fell ill. Was it a coincidence? Maybe the woman had a condition like asthma, similar to their neighbour. Either way, Terrell was determined to ask Carolyn about it the next day. Perhaps more would be known by then. The following day, Terrell could hardly wait for school to end so she could rush to the restaurant. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Even as she fell asleep, she wondered what had transpired and whether she had saved the man. At the restaurant, Terrell was welcomed like family. Carolyn was delighted to see her and led her to the kitchen. The manager was absent again, called to the police station regarding the previous day's incident. But what had happened? Was anything known yet? Asked the girl. Not really. The boss hasn't shared much information, but we are expecting a kitchen inspection the next day, so we won't be able to meet. but come by the day after tomorrow," answered Carolyn. "By the way, I have a granddaughter about your age," Kiera chimed in. "I'll bring you her jacket. It's almost new and very warm, much better than the one you're wearing. You can't go through winter in that." It felt wonderful to be under the wing of these kind people. Even Chef Paul no longer scowled at Terrell. He silently fried her an egg, again in the shape of a heart. Samuel invited Vanessa to the restaurant to celebrate his latest victory. Yes, in the coming year he was opening a branch of his gas station in another city, conquering new territory. His business was growing, and so were his profits. Samuel had every reason to be proud of his accomplishments. His father had passed away suddenly, leaving him a struggling gas station as his inheritance. At the time, Samuel had just graduated from university and had no idea what to do with the failing business. He hadn't been particularly close to his father, who lived separately and with whom he had only occasional contact. Though his father had provided gifts and paid child support dutifully, their relationship lacked warmth. Samuel was surprised to learn that his father had bequeathed the gas station to him rather than to his half-sisters from his second marriage. His mother, still bitter about her ex-husband's departure, advised Samuel to sell the station and avoid the headache. Initially, Samuel considered selling, but he decided to take the reins of the small business and see what he could make of it. Despite his mother's warnings about the potential for debt, Samuel was determined to revive and strengthen his father's legacy. He delved into the nuances of the business, learned from successful competitors, and constantly sought new knowledge. His perseverance paid off, though the journey was fraught with challenges, including the debts his mother had predicted. Samuel's efforts eventually bore fruit. Now, Samuel owned a chain of gas stations, with locations not only in his hometown, but across the country. Next year, he planned to expand into a major city, aiming to establish a significant presence there. If successful, this move would elevate his business to an entirely new level. Samuel's financial success allowed him to enjoy a comfortable lifestyle, including a luxurious apartment in the city centre and a beautiful car. He could afford almost anything he had ever dreamed of, and he didn't hesitate to shower his mother with gifts, acknowledging her sacrifices in raising him. His father, though not present during his upbringing, had given him a valuable start in life, for which Samuel was grateful. Samuel regretted not having the chance to know his father better before his passing. He believed they could have understood each other and perhaps even become friends. However, he did not maintain relationships with his half-sisters, who resented him for not inheriting all of their father's estate. One of them attempted to reconcile when Samuel's success became evident, but her insincerity only pushed him further away. As a successful businessman, Samuel had to reassess his circle of friends. Many of those he once considered close began to exploit him for his money and connections. It took time for him to realize this, but eventually he narrowed down his social circle to include only genuine and reliable people. Though some saw him as ruthless, Samuel understood the necessity of being firm in business. Despite his success, Samuel struggled to form meaningful relationships with women. While he had no shortage of admirers, he questioned the sincerity of their interest. Were they genuinely attracted to him, or were they merely seeking a comfortable life? This uncertainty led to a series of disappointing romances, as he found many women to be materialistic and more interested in his wealth than in him as a person. Soon he began to feel like a resource, an appendage to these nymphs. It was very unpleasant, and the girls, who initially seemed smart, wise and empathetic, turned out to be shallow. They watched videos and took courses on how to win the heart of a rich man, quoting things from the internet, skillfully creating a good first impression, but inside there was emptiness. "You're to blame," his cousin would sometimes scold him. Lena, with whom he had a trusting relationship since childhood, now led the accounting department of his company. He had no doubts about her. "You're drawn to doll-like appearances, big eyes, full lips, a nice figure. Look deeper. Can't a beautiful girl be intelligent, honest and sincere? Can't she truly love someone? Maybe, but you're attached to the flashy, the striking, those who focus on appearance rather than substance." Samuel felt that he needed more. Yes, he enjoyed the life of a wealthy single workaholic, and the attention of young beauties flattered him, but he yearned for something greater. He dreamed of finding his soulmate, a woman with whom he could fall asleep and wake up in an embrace, something he could share everything with, knowing she would understand, support, and not judge him. He would care for her, protect her, make her happy, and move mountains for her. That was the kind of love and relationship he longed for. Meeting Vanessa happened at just the right moment, when Samuel felt a deep longing for a close companion, a kindred spirit. She was a waitress in the cafeteria on the first floor of the business centre, where his company's main office was located. He often went there for a cup of coffee with a pastry or a quick bite. Vanessa was always polite and friendly with him, but Samuel didn't take it personally. He thought she was simply doing her job, well, part of which was being courteous to customers. Then one evening, Samuel went downstairs late, having stayed long to work on a report. Samuel had always relied on himself for crucial decisions, rarely delegating key responsibilities to his deputies. This often led to late nights at the office. The cafeteria had long since closed, and only the dim wall lights illuminated the first floor. He bid the security guard good night and stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. As he did so, he noticed a familiar figure, a waitress from the cafe, sitting on a bench near the business centre, seemingly in tears. He couldn't just walk by. "Is everything all right? Do you need help?" he asked gently. The young woman looked up at him with tear-streaked eyes. No, everything's fine." She tried to smile, as if slipping back into her professional demeanour, despite her workday having ended long ago. But Samuel could see that something was wrong. He sat down beside her. "Why don't you tell me what's bothering you?" he said. "You're my favourite waitress, always smiling, always spreading positivity. So?" Samuel genuinely wanted to help her. She looked so unhappy and vulnerable. For the first time he noticed her beauty, her delicate features, large blue eyes and slender figure. She began to share her story. It was a long and rather disheartening tale. Vanessa had grown up in a small village, about 100 kilometres from the city. Like many young people, she had left her rural home searching for better opportunities. She dreamed of becoming a designer, but failed to gain admission to her chosen college due to a lack of technical skills. "They said I had the talent and the taste, but I didn't know how to work in the required techniques. Where could I have learned? Our village had no such activities. The local city kids had been attending art and design classes since elementary school. I didn't stand a chance against them," she explained. Returning to the village, where prospects were slim, was not an option for Vanessa, so she took a job as a waitress, hoping to find her way in the city. Vanessa had initially worked in a bar, but it wasn't safe for a young woman, so she moved to a restaurant and eventually to a cafe in a business centre. She enjoyed her job there, the pay was good, the clients were polite, and the schedule was convenient for her studies. Vanessa had enrolled in a prestigious economics program, balancing work and education without any support. She was proud of her progress and the prospects ahead. Suddenly, everything changed. "Our cafe has a new director," Vanessa sighed.
He's taken an interest in me and began to show me attention, despite my efforts to remain neutral and avoid him. His advances became more insistent, and his intentions clearer. Today, he called me into his office and presented me with an ultimatum: become his lover or lose her job. He gave me time until the next day to decide, reminding me that there were plenty of other candidates willing to take my place. And I need this job, Vanessa sobbed. The schedule is perfect, the pay is good, and I've grown accustomed to it. What am I going to do? Samuel felt an urge of righteous anger. He had seen the new director, an unremarkable middle-aged man with a protruding belly and small beady eyes. Despite being married with 3 children, this man was shamelessly pursuing Vanessa. "Wait," Samuel said, an idea forming in his mind. "Where did you say you're studying?" "I'm in my final year at an economics university, and then I'll graduate." "Listen, I actually have a part-time job for you. It's a job for students, and if you need help, our employees will assist you." "I would really, really like that." Vanessa looked at Samuel with hopeful eyes. His spine tingled at her gaze. Besides Vanessa, he felt strong, decisive and kind, a true knight. "So tomorrow tell your boss that you're quitting. Just leave. Let him rush to find a new waitress." Vanessa beamed with happiness, and her joy was the best reward for Samuel. He felt a new sensation blossoming in his heart. He enjoyed being her saviour and wanted to continue their connection. "It's late. Let me drive you home." "Thank you. That would be very helpful." On the way, they chatted like old friends. Vanessa turned out to be intelligent and well-read. She loved history and animals, just like Samuel. They discovered they enjoyed the same movies and books, a wonderful coincidence. By the time Samuel dropped Vanessa off at her apartment, they both knew something serious and genuine had sparked between them. Vanessa started working at Samuel's firm and immediately showed promise as a prospective specialist. The head of the economics department praised her. "She lacks experience, but her grasp is already strong. This girl will go far." Samuel smiled, pleased to hear such words about his beloved. Yes, beloved. By then he knew he was in love. Vanessa was tender and gentle with him, yet firm and cool with others. This contrast captivated him. She always sensed Samuel's moods keenly, never demanding anything or hinting at expensive gifts, unlike many before her. But Samuel was ready to lay everything he had at her feet. Never before had his feelings been so overwhelming. Vanessa cared for him and gladly accepted his care in return. They were the perfect couple, so it wasn't long before Samuel proposed. Why wait? He was confident he had finally found his soulmate. Their understanding was so profound that it seemed almost unbelievable. After the wedding, life continued as usual. Samuel dreamed of having children, but it turned out that Vanessa was having difficulties conceiving. She was troubled by this, though not because she desperately wanted children. She had other goals at the time. Vanessa knew how much Samuel wanted to be a father, and her inability to fulfill this wish troubled her. Samuel, of course, assured her that it wasn't the most important thing. He couldn't bear to see sadness in her eyes. Lena, Samuel's cousin, didn't quite trust Vanessa, which slightly bothered him. He wanted his loved ones to get along. "I don't know," Lena would say, shaking her head. "She seems fake to me, just like your previous girlfriends, but smarter and more dangerous. She's a better actress." Samuel argued and praised Vanessa's qualities to Lena, believing that his cousin would eventually understand. Then Vanessa left the company to start her own business, a long-held dream of hers.
Samuel, of course, helped Vanessa with money and advice. She bought a coffee shop, fulfilling her dream of owning a place where she once worked as a waitress. Now she was often away from home, understandably busy with her new venture. She travelled to other cities on business and stayed late at the office. Samuel understood her dedication better than anyone. However, strange rumours began to reach him. Supposedly, Vanessa had a lover. At first, Samuel dismissed these whispers. They were a prominent couple, and gossip often surrounded such figures. But the insinuations grew more frequent. Vanessa seemed to remain the same loving, attentive partner, yet she also seemed to be drifting away. Samuel had some vague suspicions, nothing concrete, just a shadow cast over their seemingly perfect relationship. He decided to surprise Vanessa with a late lunch at a fancy restaurant in the middle of the work week, celebrating a lucrative contract that would open a new branch in a promising city, a significant milestone for their family. Vanessa agreed enthusiastically, much to Samuel's delight. He had expected to have to persuade her, as she had been quite busy lately. The restaurant was beautifully decorated, perfect for a festive mood. Samuel shared his success with Vanessa, who was genuinely happy for him. "You've always been smart, successful and decisive. I never doubted you," she said, looking at him with the same admiration as years ago. In moments like this, Samuel forgot all his doubts and rumours, simply enjoying the happiness of being with the woman he loved. They decided to start with cheese soup and then order something special for dessert. It was a celebration, after all. Just as they were about to order, Samuel's phone rang. It was his assistant. As Samuel finished his urgent call in the hallway, a small, pale girl approached him. She was thin, with a sharp upturned nose and large eyes that dominated her face. Dressed in worn, ill-fitting clothes, she earnestly tried to convince Samuel that Vanessa had put something in his soup. Initially, Samuel was inclined to dismiss the girl's claims as childish fantasies, but something in her voice and eyes suggested she was telling the truth, or at least believed she was. Given the recent tension between him and Vanessa, Samuel couldn't entirely ignore the girl's warning. He returned to the table, but hesitated to touch the soup, despite Vanessa's urging. As musicians took the stage and began setting up their instruments, a loud clatter distracted Vanessa. And before Samuel could realize what he was doing, he switched his and Vanessa's plates. Quickly, literally instantly. And then he started eating. Vanessa, seeing Samuel eating, smiled and began her meal. Soon she started coughing and gasping for air. Her face paled, then turned blue. Panicked, Samuel called an ambulance, his mind racing with the girl's words. It seemed she had been right. Vanessa had intended to poison him, but his quick action had reversed their fates. Samuel's decision to switch the plates was driven by a lingering doubt about the truth of the girl's story. He couldn't fully believe that Vanessa had actually attempted to poison him, but he also couldn't ignore the possibility. The tragic irony was that his precaution led to Vanessa's near-fatal consequences instead. The ambulance arrived swiftly, but Vanessa's condition was critical. The medical team worked frantically, administering treatments and setting up an IV drip, but her life hung in the balance. "Does she have any chronic illnesses?" the doctor asked. "It must be poisoning," Sam blurted out. "Poisoning? What kind? Is it known? Speak up quickly. We're going to lose her. It's important." With her last ounce of strength, Vanessa named the poison, inadvertently confirming her guilt while also
saving her own life. This revelation made everything crystal clear to Samuel. Vanessa had indeed intended to poison him with the very substance now coursing through her veins. Fortunately, knowing the specific poison allowed the medical team to act quickly and save Vanessa. Had Samuel eaten the soup, his chances of survival would have been slim, as Vanessa would likely not have aided the doctors. The ensuing investigation revealed the grim truth. Vanessa confessed to her crime, and the evidence against her was overwhelming. Surveillance footage from the dining hall and the discovery of the poison in her purse sealed her fate. Her motive was a sadly familiar tale. A small-town girl seeking a better life, yet genuinely in love with a boy from her village. Her ambition and desire for a different life had led her down a dark path, ultimately exposing her true intentions. Vanessa and her accomplice had planned to secure a comfortable future by eliminating Samuel, who would have provided them with wealth. Vanessa had orchestrated their meeting, meticulously preparing by learning everything about Samuel, which explained why he was so surprised by their compatibility. They shared the same interests and views on life, only because Vanessa had studied him thoroughly. After marrying, the next step in their plan was to eliminate Samuel. As his legal widow, Vanessa would inherit the majority of his fortune, becoming truly wealthy and free. They chose a rare and dangerous poison that quickly broke down in the body, making it nearly impossible to determine the cause of death. It seemed like the perfect plan. However, fate intervened in the form of a little girl hiding near the Christmas tree. She witnessed everything and warned Samuel. For some reason he believed her and instinctively switched their plates. The rest unfolded as it did. Vanessa and her accomplice were arrested. She received a lengthy sentence as the primary perpetrator, while he got a lesser sentence as an accomplice. Both received what they deserved. Terrell, as usual, visited the restaurant after school to see her friends and have lunch. She was always welcomed warmly. Even the manager didn't mind her visits and had grown fond of her. Terrell was always treated to meals and listened to with care. That day, Terrell was studying history with Kiara when the man whose life she had saved appeared in the doorway. She knew how his story had unfolded and felt proud of her actions. Samuel stood before her, smiling, with a beautifully wrapped box in his hands. "Hello, my little saviour," he said, looking at Terrell. "I never properly thanked you for saving my life." "You're welcome," Terrell replied with a smile. "It wasn't that hard, really." "This is for you," Samuel said, handing her the box. "And Terrell, I'm aware of your situation. Therefore, I'm going to pay for your mother's treatment for her addiction. And while she's in treatment, you'll all be looked after by a nanny I've hired. I have already rented an apartment for you, and I intend to renovate your apartment. I have also hired a teacher who will help you and your siblings with your studies. Everything will work out, my dear, and I'll be keeping an eye on your future, little one. You've been like a guardian angel to me." "Wow!" Carolyn exclaimed. "Terrell, it's your chance for a better life." Terrell was silent, trying to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. She understood that her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. The adults around her smiled warmly, sharing in her joy and anticipation.